Deadlock Fight Night presented by Intel here in EU. Back at you for the best of 3 money match. Buff Enjoyers nearly getting eliminated by 1 win. Now alive to the money match versus Parivision. Of course, I'm ZP here with DDK and Jake. And gentlemen, it was a tough road, but now Buff Enjoyers have to feel pretty good about themselves given the fact that they are running into this after beating Parivision in Maelstrom Masters 2-0. The question is, can they do it again, Jake, when teams have had time to, look at a little bit of tape and make adjustments from yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, Buff Enjoyers, right? Like you said, maybe they are the team to beat here, given that they won the last series against Parivision in the other tournament and looked really solid there. One thing I will say for Buff Enjoyers that I would love to see as a slight draft adjustment is maybe just one damage dealer with a little bit more range potential. I guess you could sort of see Paradox that way, but I feel like Paradox has to build so much mobility and survivability armor that I'm not sure that Paradox really ends up filling that category. Whereas something like the Wraith, the Great Talon, just a little bit more range poking potential, I think could have made some of these fights a little more difficult for their opponents, where running that like all-in heavy brawling comp, it paid dividends in certain moments, but there were other times, like you were saying, DDK, where the enemy team was able to fall back in the middle of the team fight, kind of slow things down and get some poke pressure on before re-engaging, and that proved to be a struggle for Buff Enjoyers in terms of how they're looking to play the engagement. So, either you could maybe go harder with like a Viscous of your own, someone who can ultra frontline and like deny any kind of escape, or Mo deny any kind of escape, or I think maybe you could hedge your draft a little bit with some longer range poke to be able to tolerate those longer range extended team fights.
That is an interesting aspect of the drafting process, because you almost don't necessarily know what the best kind of team strat looks like until you've completed the whole draft. And so that's kind of interesting, because I think we were surprised to see how heavy the damage was on OneWin's end, and it ended up enabling them to have this strategy where they could leverage certain strengths without that answer, like you were just describing. So that is a really fun part of Deadlock, but I do agree. I think they'll probably try to find a bit more damage this time around as well.
Now, look, we were about to go in the rosters, but there's also other important matters here. Like, if you're watching, you're comfortable, why not get even more comfortable with some of our Deadlock Fight Night merch? That's right, we've expanded. It's not just getting gooped right now. We got some other fun designs here. Jake, I know you had a few in particular. You looked at and you're like, you know what? I like this.
I'm going to cop the Viscous hoodie, no doubt.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And I need the mug. I'm a daily coffee drinker. I got to be rocking the DFN mug. That's just too good of a collectible. You know what I'm saying?
True. True. Yeah. What about the snapback?
Yeah, you got a desk mat over there. But yeah, it's new merch. Also, shouts to Average Jonas, who is actually wearing some of that merch on stream. In addition to co-streaming, and which is also awesome. Shout outs to Jonas. But gentlemen, now looking at the rosters, here's what we got at you. Of course, if you are a historian here of Deadlock Fight Night, Parivision is essentially a merge team between the old DMS and Pajolaya Scumbria. They did a rework after Buff Enjoyers just completely crushed the month of December in EU Deadlock. But the super team, as it were, for Parivision, they got off to a rough start, losing their first best of 1 in Deadlock Fight Night after making the roster, but came back a few weeks later and now are the ones on top. And, I think for this roster, you have the carry potential of Play With Me with flying carry power and Prestis, really good support from Litz, playmaking potential from Taz. It's overall a very complete team.
Yeah, I think it's definitely, I think, one of the most fun teams to watch. What's been interesting for me is seeing how Play With Me was such a big focus, I feel like, for the kind of, ex-DMS or like the now Parivision roster in the past. But as time has gone on, we've just seen the depth of the entire pool of players, especially as people had to react to Play With Me as maybe, some of his characters were not as powerful anymore, or he had to change the play style. Again, despite all of that, we've got a team that's got great macro, has great hero pool depth. And I think we couldn't really ask for maybe a better matched finals.
I like Buff Enjoyers for this one, honestly. I feel like this is like kind of the dream match you want to have going into the finals, where it was close, you were behind, but you held your nerve, you stayed composed. And in the end, I think, honestly, Buff Enjoyers fought really well. There was even that one team fight that went against them where, they were kind of maybe overcommitted on the Yamato, but that was down to like inches, right? Yamato was like a couple hundred health escaping from that, where if that pick off were cleaner and a little quicker, could have been a much better team fight. Like there's a lot of these earlier mid-game team fights that could have gone even better for Buff Enjoyers and could have put them in a stronger spot, and they still held their nerve. They still made good decisions to come out on top in the end of the game. And so that's the kind of like confidence building you need. Whereas if you just hard stomped, I feel like maybe you actually don't get as much confidence as a comeback victory gives you, and as much hype really going into this best of 3 money match here.
Just disappointed.
Well, the band comes out here, and it is Calico, where Parivision very clearly stating, we see what you've been doing, Buff Enjoyers, with reworking your compositions. We're going to take away one of your new tools in the Calico, which, realistically, you compare Buff Enjoyers this week to Buff Enjoyers from a few weeks ago. Yeah, the 7 might be exiled perhaps forever right now, but the other thing is that they're a team that has really embraced Calico very quickly. Now, Dan, as I look at this here, for Buff Enjoyers, you wonder what you take away in turn. I personally think it still might be the Vindicta. And yeah, as I say that, yeah, Vindicta's out of there. I just don't think anyone wants to see Prestus on Vindicta aside from Parivision fans.
Yeah, certainly. And with a matchup like this, I wonder also, what kind of picks are you going to be using to take away options from your opponents? For example, Parivision might pick a Paradox to take that away from Mikhail S, or a Shiv, another hero that's really important, especially right now, with what he is able to offer and how you can build a comp around him. So there's a lot of options to play with, but we get the Viscous again. We have not really seen this in Europe until today, like this insta pick Viscous. That's crazy. I love it.
I played a couple ranked games of Viscous this morning, and I was really digging the 10% ball, the turn rate change. I mean, it seems small, but your ability to have a more reliable stun in these team fights is a really big deal. And I think, honestly, if you're going to play a draft like that, where you have a lot of, long range carries, Viscous just fits in so well, not only setting up a ton of damage for them with stuns and bouncing enemies around, but also being able to cube them and save them if those long range heroes, typically a little bit squishier, get jumped on in the late game. So I honestly just think this hero is really good. For Buff Enjoyers, though, I'd like to see them maybe snag one of those long range damage dealers. I think a Wraith could be a really good opener here for Buff Enjoyers. Maybe that's a hero I think Parivision would really like to have on their roster, to be that sort of long range damage dealer behind Viscous.
Yeah, I think the question for Buff Enjoyers is how much do they value a good frontline, right? Where before they picked Calico in the first round of picks that they had, right? They went Paradox, Calico, and Jake, they say frontline secondary. If we don't get Calico, we will go for the Wraith. So you called it. They decide Wraith going to be a slightly higher priority. They get it away from Parivision. Now, if you're Parivision here, Dan, I'm looking at this and going, well, what Buff Enjoyers like playing in terms of, setting things up. Maybe this is where you take the Geist away, and also on top of taking the Geist, you take something like a Shiv, or what I would love to see, Warden. Play With Me plays a very good Warden. Shariq is attached to Warden at the hip. Basically, every game you look at for Buff Enjoyers, they put Shariq on Warden. Make Shariq play something else. Why give him the Warden? If they pick Warden here, I will be thrilled on a draft strategy level, but I don't know if it'll happen just yet.
I think it's a good combo with Holiday and Viscous too, right? You got a lot of stun set up for that trap to proc. Honestly, I don't disagree with the idea at all. I think maybe there could be a challenge against something like Wraith, but you get Slowing Hex online, and it's not such a big deal anymore.
Yeah, the Holiday pick's interesting as well since the nurse. I wonder how much those nurse are actually affecting, but they go with the Haze as well. Obviously, Play With Me is going to play the Haze, but Haze is kind of like, wait. Didn't we see this last week where like Haze was getting picked and we were like, what is happening?
Haze was getting picked, but I don't think Haze was getting picked this early in the draft. You have so many other options in the draft. Was Buff Enjoyers going to pick Haze late in the game where maybe they were going to mid-ban, but man, that's
so strange because
that's a little bit surprising.
It's not like Buff Enjoyers is going to take it away from you, right? You could leave it to the end, right? It's not like anyone's stealing that Haze. So I think
Geist is a really good counter pick too. Like Geist can just run into the Haze ult, reliably get low and swap her and finish her. Like it's actually a really sick counter. Whereas even once Haze gets unstoppable, right, and she's like not vulnerable to the stuns or some of the control, Geist still has that huge threat of like the uncontrolled damage of Haze can actually be a weakness when you're getting your HP swapped by Geist. Maybe you can just silence her and full burst her, but I think I'm a little worried for Parivision as far as like the commitment on the Haze this early in the draft. I feel like there's a lot of counters could come down here for Buff Enjoyers.
Well, the other thing too that worries me is that they would still have the option, I think, on the turn to pick the Warden and get it away from Shriek, right? But generally speaking, in their hero pool, their Haze player with Play With Me is also the Warden player. So in terms of draft strategy, if Buff Enjoyers was going to go for Warden, which basically any of their recent games indicate, right? They don't even have to get Warden until the very last pick here because it's unlikely Parivision is going to go with like Hayes and Warden together. The ban on the Kelvin, though, does make sense. It is kind of the support comfort choice for Buff Enjoyers. They'll probably go with an Ivy. Although, again, it kind of brings up the idea for Parivision, what do they play as support if Buff Enjoyers picks up Ivy on the turn here? I suppose we'll see.
Yeah, it does kind of put some pressure on you to pick up that Ivy now if you're Buff Enjoyers, maybe as opposed to something else, just in fear of that getting stolen. Unless you know, there's a huge comfort in running the McGinnis as an alternative potentially. But yeah, so they get the Mirage. Now are they giving up the Ivy? At this point, when we have Holiday then into Hayes, I really don't know what to predict for Parivision.
Well, I think the Holiday was definitely for Prestus, so you won't be seeing a Talon here in all likelihood. Obviously, a lot of people in seeing the Holiday pick kind of wonder because Holiday, you know, in most people's estimations, got nerfed with the changes that came in because you don't jungle as well. Maybe the hero is just that broken in Parivision's estimation, but instead they pick up Yamato. I think maybe they go Ivy here unless they were really angling towards like McGinnis. Dynamo, you don't really see a ton in EU.
You could also think though that they might just not go for a support here with Viscous, but I feel like they should. I feel like the Ivy is so good on Buff Enjoyers right now. It's just so perfect of a pick. Like, there's almost an argument for just taking it and like making it work because you really don't want to give it to Buff Enjoyers. You know, with something like Mirage, extra global pleasants can combo in with Wraith and Ivy. Gonna be the Abrams, so maybe some of that frontline stun control. I'm a little worried about the Abrams though, because like, you know, sometimes this Geist and Mirage, you know, Wraith even, like, I feel like Abrams can struggle to actually tank through, you know, some of these team fights, or getting something like Silence through the wall. Like, do you really want to build debuff remover on Abrams? Maybe, but I'm a little more skeptical of Abrams these days. Like, it's a very heavy commitment on snowballing the game, and you know, getting a lot of pickoffs into big team fights from Holiday, Hayes, and Viscous.
Helping people's what I do.
Yeah, and giving up the Ivy too. Is the Abrams pick, do you think, taking it away from like Listig, or just taking it away as an option? By the way, we don't have Shiv yet, which is
Shiv was completely ignored in last draft. Maybe these teams are like deep prioing him in the current meta. I mean, he's been a first pick for a long time, so it really does seem like he's fallen out of the meta. Could still be picked up here.
He might be less pick here. Like, just in the fact that they're missing so much in terms of frontline that Shiv would make sense as a final pick here for Buff Enjoyers, unless they wanted to just go the squishiest comp of all time, or maybe a Mo. Right? Well, and they go Lash. Okay, they go double Playmaker, but you look at this is the squishiest lineup I think we've ever seen Buff Enjoyers play on DFN, because usually they're all about running like triple frontline. In this case, the only frontline really they have is Geist, which is a different look. It's away from what they usually play. Now the second question here is it more support Viscous, or do we see a Dynamo or McGinnis to round out Parivision here? I think I would still expect a support, but okay, no. Mo and Krill. So Viscous perhaps played more support-esque, and God, you talk about frontline, Yamato, Abrams, Mo. If nothing else, Parivision is thick, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, I think there could reach a point in the game where, you know, like before Unstoppables come out, where Parivision could, you know, continue to snowball. And maybe they're really going for, I think, kind of an earlier mid-game timing here. Maybe, but because I'm just worried, like once you get Unstoppables on Buff Enjoyers, I feel like the game is like kind of out of control. Like once, you know, a lot of these heroes, and even before those Unstoppables, I'm a little worried, right? With this heavy commitment on pickoffs, if you're just like pressuring the map on a global level for Buff Enjoyers, shoving in tons of waves with Mirage and Ivy and Wraith, I mean, it's going to have to be really clean from Parivision. They're going to have to get pickoffs, but like if you send 3 or 4 players to get a pickoff, it's not going to be worth it. Like the map is going to be just out of control in terms of Buff Enjoyers' ability to pressure you. So Parivision, I think there's a lot of pressure on them, especially this Hayes, to be like snowballing, hitting this timing where Hayes is like the most farm hero in the game, has Unstoppable and Lucky Shot or something, and you're just like ending on a couple pickoffs, getting a mid boss and going. I think we get a little bit beyond that into some of these like super late game timings. I'm going to be a little worried for them.
I actually kind of like the lineup, because there's so much distraction for play with me to play the Haze and just come in. Like you've got the Mo, you've got the Yamato, you've got the Abrams and the Holiday and the Viscous. That is so much disruption and just so many targets, like tanky targets to switch between. And I think play with me, his style was often never really about landing sick ults either. It was about like finding good timings to get into the fight, like entering with a sleep dagger, like good positioning and just like roaming. Like that, obviously, one of the things that nerfed play with me style on Haze was how the soul sharing between the early lanes was previously. That was abused massively in the play style, but not anymore.
Yeah, and you take a look at the composition here and where it's all set up. It's super interesting for buff enjoyers where, okay, maybe we'll see if the names are accurate, but for second, it looked like it said Sharik on Paradox, which would be ridiculous when you expect Mikhail to normally play it. I think we saw Lash being played by Listic. That makes sense. Take a second here to get the names updated, but we look at physically where the characters are. Anything amiss to you, Jake, lane-wise?
I'm just going to be watching, I think, this Wraith Abrams lane in terms of the farm they're able to get. Abrams should just be able to like tank this out and get decent farm, but I think this lane can end up being a little bit explosive. Abrams, gets picked off, Wraith can start to snowball ahead, and vice versa. You get caught by a pin and things can get out of control, or you get caught without your charge. A lot of pressure and even some help coming in, really wanting to prioritize this lane. I think this is a good call from buff enjoyers, like getting your Wraith off to an early lead, starting the map pressure on. I think she's going to be a critical factor in keeping that presence online and making it so Parivision can't properly group up to get those pickoffs they want.
I will say this, Dan, as I look at the composition, I feel like buff enjoyers has really put themselves in a window where they have to get ahead early the mid game, because if they get behind, just the pure tankiness of Parivision is going to be very, very difficult, I think, for them to deal with, especially if Saf has a decent game. I think, is Saf doing well or not well is one of the bigger storylines here, just because Abrams as a hero has such volatility, but you never really want to be 10k behind when you have to just chunk through naturally tanky heroes.
Yeah, I totally agree. The more I think about the Parivision lineup, the more I'm like very optimistic and curious about the how well it can actually do. And I mean, just like you say, if Yamato gets ahead enough as well as play with me, and you've got all the tankiness across the lineup to deal with, it's going to be very hard to find those kills. And again, play with me is going to also likely play a style where you shouldn't be able to catch him off. It's the whole point is that he's going to come in on angles or timings where he can most optimally get damage in, and he's relying upon the distraction of the massive front line that exists here. So we'll see how that dynamic plays out. But a quick bit of action. Play with me actually in some trouble. Oh, just caught with the tornado, the last little bit of the tornado, and that's play with me to an early death.
And not just play with me, but Presta's going to be joining him back in spawn. Goes for the parry. Nothing connecting. Buff enjoyers a quick 2 over here in lane 3. So, this to an extent, would be expected. I think the early lane pressure that buff enjoyers has when you look at their lanes, it's a lot of just general lane power. I think for Parivision, they have to stem the bleeding here, Dan. They can't get too far behind too quickly to where buff enjoyers are so ahead that they don't really care that they're dealing with hard to kill heroes, because they're just they're able to stat check them in turn.
Yep, yeah, it's definitely going to be really interesting to see how it actually transpires here. Like you said, the early game is really important to keep our eyes on, and so far what we see from buff enjoyers getting really active, getting some of those opening kills, definitely a good sign. But with that said, the nature of Parivision's lineup gives them a lot of early lane control too. Nice catch there by Play With Me, and that's what we're talking about, finding the timings, the angles, and that's what Play With Me does best.
Yeah, I mean, that was the Play With Me special, is what I was going to say to that, where I feel like you don't really see other Haze players do that. Like, just find an angle and get a quick pick off, especially when being a little bit more mobile on this Haze early on, where, you don't see it as much as the days when double lane soaking was, in vogue, and, Play With Me did it better than most. But it does look like, from the early parts of this game, Play With Me is going to be a little bit more and play it as a playmaker Haze, which is usually not how the character is played. But also, I mean, in 2025, Haze isn't really played much at all, so who's to say how Haze is played, Dan?
Yeah, no, exactly, yeah, it is interesting, because as you say, Play With Me style is somewhat consistent, just a few alterations, but his style was pioneering previously. No one else was doing it like he was. So with that said, right now things are looking fairly even. Slight edge here on the stalls for buff enjoyers, but nice bottle punch harassment coming on in. So nothing too crazy happening right now. Yeah, ZP.
No, not yet. And ooh, Abrams going down lane though. That's always a tough angle. I think if right now in terms of rotations, if you're Parivision, you rotate over to help Abrams, not only because you want to help Abrams, but because you want to hold Wraith back. Those are two of the most farm-sensitive heroes in the game. We know all too well from NA what can happen when an Abrams is both ahead and behind. You know, Calc actually giving us both sides of the coin in one night, right? So I think rotationally, they're going to want to send more over the lane. One is fast. Great pressure in from the Viscous, finds one.
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. We'll have to keep our eyes on how that Abrams and Wraiths matchup goes on the first lane. And similarly, also like together on this Yamato, you know, how well will the performance be against another strong solo laner and Demov? You know, this is a really also important 1v1, and these extremity lanes are really, really key in the early to mid game as well, in terms of control. As those walkers, those guardians are the safest to kind of take. The ganks are often going to come to these lanes. And so far, somewhat even for both teams still.
Just keeping an eye on the rotations. I think also there's a tell that we didn't talk about in how Viscous would be played. When you have your playmaker player on the Viscous, you could generally expect it's going to be a more mobile Viscous, right? Like Tass usually playing things like Paradox or Pocket or otherwise. So Tass is going to be a super mobile Viscous as Demov just unrelenting. Versus Yamato, and yeah, it's getting bloody over here in lane 3. See Prestus right now in looking for Ivy. Don't think enough damage is going to come in, but already some quick rotations on the right side of the map.
Yeah, and also Buff enjoys you getting the pick off onto Saf on the Abrams on the left, coming off of Michaelis's gank. So Michaelis doing, you know, what any responsible Paradox should be doing at this point in the game, which is, you know, getting that roaming going and facilitating those early kills. So right now, although the soul difference isn't too great, it does feel like the overall control and initiation has been with Buff and Joy's favor, or in their favor, I should say. And now we've got a gank coming across Parivision, sending Saf on the Abrams across the lane too.
Yeah, he's looking for either the Lash or the Paradox, and you see Lash under the gun, goes for the slam on the tower, doesn't find anyone. As Saf, blast after blast going in, I don't think can dive over, just not enough HP to do that, but still decent map presence being applied. And oh, this is the 2-for-1 over here. Viscous, Abrams, moving on in versus Wraith. I think early teleport came on out, and Zergy pretty chilled about that, Dan. Does not care too much, able to back out, but yo, back over here in lane 3, play with me with the double. Great timing.
Yeah, that's not a good sign for Buff and Joyous. You know, play with me. Obviously, play with me is going to want to get ahead. It is hard to get ahead on Haze. You've got to be really expert. Obviously, that's why play with me like picks Haze. It's such a specialist choice, but coming back in again with the fixation, the perfect tracking, the damage accumulation is absolutely brutal, and there's nothing Demov can do. So the roaming again from play with me, as you would expect, as always it is on the play with me Haze, it's effective.
Also, Abrams, bit of bodyguard here, Viscous in lane. It's turned into a 2v2 over here in lane 1. A little bit of melee action. However, when you look at Saf, and Saf is as low as they are right now, it's not really the ideal situation to overcommit, but here we go. Play with me. Over here, bullet dance, enough to take down Demov with the aid of Yamato, and just like that, I think you kind of mentioned it, Dan. Play with me is a real threat right now. This is not the player you want to see suddenly get significantly ahead of the game.
Definitely not. And I think it's 4 kills in a row at the moment in like quick succession. At this point, it feels like we're not even at the 10-minute mark. So play with me doing a lot of damage here. A lot of attention on Buff and Joyous here on this lane. 1-3 players to deflect 3 of Parivision. Parivision surely won't be sticking out into that position for too long. They might go back into lane 2. I don't think they can keep pushing that, but they're going to keep trying. In fact, Listic will go down. So I was wrong. There's the attempt of the juggle coming in from Holiday. Parivision, again, they're looking so good right now, ZP. It's kind of hard to believe.
The Viscous play from Taz, taking advantage of the increased mobility, just rolling him on over here in lane 1. The power of Viscous being played as a playmaker, again, being a big factor in our second map of the day. We must see Holiday, free little Guardian pick off over in lane 2, I believe. No, it was lane 3.
Yeah, really, like 7k lead is actually pretty sizable for this point of the game for Parivision. More action, though, on lane 1. This could be a pretty pretty scary fight for Parivision. They're outnumbered at this point, 4v2 against them. So they'll be very cautious. So that you'd imagine the bridge buff will go to Buffenjoy's here, but that does leave the right side map bridge buff open. And in fact, look at this. We get the aggression coming in from Parivision. They see the retreat and they want to chase it down, but they don't get anything.
Yeah, also, Mikhail for Buffenjoyers just rotated back over. Swap at the ready. Plenty of backup. Should it be landed? But for now, Buffenjoyers just keeping a focus on the Guardian. Now, though, looking for Task. Task blown up. Listic, Death Slam. Force out the Seismic Slam in turn from Sap. Don't know if Sap's going to get away. There's a lot of people here, not too much for Sap. However, the rotation in, the Litz comes in, lands the combo on the Zergy. The rotation enough to turn the fight. Dan, midway through, the power of combo just able to lock down slippery heroes.
Yeah, just the imagery of Mo using a combo on someone and then Mo standing on the other side, just like punching the person in the face. It's just so savage. And it is continuing to get better and better here for Parivision. A huge emphasis on that lane one, but Parivision responding with just enough to deflect it, and they are still looking like they've got Buffenjoyers on the run.
And Prestus just laying down the damage in lane 3. And speaking of laying things down here, Parivision's has a 6k lead. We had the items up for a split second. Let's get them up again, because I think we got a slight lull here. Take a look at what everyone is packing here at 10 minutes. Quicksilver reload coming in for play with me. Just even more sustained pressure. But as I say that, together, Dan, getting absolutely pursued here. Telekinesis in, force out Shadow Transformation. They might just have to sell for blowing the ult, though.
Yeah, it looks like that's the case. And I wonder if Holiday might be one of those picks for Prestus, where it's a bit of a specialist pick that will come in, but another combo, that's fantastic. And another follow-up from Sap off of that combo. So this Mo Abrams business is looking pretty sexy right now here for Parivision, as we get Buffenjoyers responding at least with a tower down, potentially. Whoa. Okay, so he's going to just go in and get destroyed there. Wasn't expecting to see that. And just look at the tankiness here, just the presence from Parivision.
Well, it's presence from Parivision, and Buffenjoyers just picking bad fight after bad fight. I mean, part of it is Parivision with great rotations, but it's a full team-wide effort across the map. Buffenjoyers just losing just about every fight over this period. It's not enough to go to a mid-boss, but it is enough that, now Parivision very much in control of the game, and some big storylines as far as who's getting the farm that should be worrying the Buffenjoyers right now.
Do you ban Haze? Do you first ban Haze?
No, absolutely not. You do not do that. Even as good as Play With Me is on it, I don't think it's an Ido pocket situation, because Play With Me can, he has a really good Warden, has plenty of other great heroes. But.
Okay, well, we'll see about what happens, EP, but right now, it is just continued decimation. Buffenjoyers, I mean, they don't really seem to be in control of anything here. Parivision dictating everything on the map, getting all the picks that they want. And again, there's so much freedom, I feel like, for Play With Me. Just Play With Me by himself is able to find amazing picks. But if you add in the Mo and the Yamato and the Abrams, and I mean the whole lineup, I feel like Play With Me has so much freedom to just operate in between those heroes.
Another big item being bought here by Play With Me, who at this point is in full press W mode, Dan. This is Play With Me in their element, where their Haze looks the scariest because it just feels like Play With Me just runs around the map with reckless abandon and simply gets things done. It like bends the rules of reality for what a Haze should actually be able to kill, is the juxt of it. But now, look, Parivision, I think right now the goal is keep the advantage and, don't give up a free earn, and, ideally just don't give up picks in general. By the way, remember the storyline at the start of the game here, Dan. Buffenjoyers need to be the ones ahead at this point, just given how Parivision is likely to scale with a way tankier lineup.
Yeah, exactly. This is, you described that earlier. You said that was your fear for Buffenjoyers, should they be put in a position like this. With that said, we obviously saw a game previously where Buffenjoyers were quite behind, and they just fundamentally made some good choices, and they punished overextensions. So you wouldn't expect, I think, Parivision to maybe make the same sort of overextensions as we saw in the previous game, but they are human. They can make mistakes, and Buffenjoyers is a team that's good enough to punish.
Well, Dan, if Parivision continues to get ahead and then suicides into the patron, we will never beat the script writing allegations. People will just demand new writers for season 2. That's all I gotta say. I don't think Parivision will be repeating that mistake. If for nothing else, they got a full view of what happened to one win. I think they would go with Jake's standard take on it, which is play a little bit slower, secure the win.
Well, big fight by the urn at the moment, as we see together, just trying to escape. There's Play With Me, popping that ult. The bullet dance is not going to find too much here. It gets evaded, and Play With Me get caught out and focused. That's how you do it. That's how you get things started here for Buff Enjoyers. Now trying to burst down the rest of the team here. They're doing a great job in just bursting down individual players, focus firing, and oh my god, okay, something is still going to be able to brother together. It will be able to survive that and actually win the fight. That's so unfair.
How in the world is Together still alive? It looks like, okay, they're going to get the Yamato. No, life leeches just enough. Instead, grapples over, gets a piece of the Ivy with Litz. And Parivision continuing to add on to their lead where, we haven't really talked about it, but they're doing this without really a more traditional support. In reality, Litz picks Mo and says, my fists will be the support. That is all we'll need here. And it's hard to argue with the lockdown results as, again, we just get the Play With Me cam of Play With Me just rotating around, finding, kill after kill, no rhyme or reason, just good opportunities.
Yeah, and you can really see the synergy playing out when they are grouped up, looking to take initiative. Just, what you're trading off in terms of some of those support, like in the early to mid game, it doesn't seem like it's that much of a factor, in part because you're not, a support will typically focus on getting some of the support items, but it's not like a Kelvin's heal is going to be particularly good in the early game. It's when it gets more spirit behind it, when it gets more itemization behind it later on, that it really comes into full force as the support. And so you get this early I feel like early game advantage with a comp like this, and that's what I think they've been leveraging like crazy with the initiative that they're taking as a team.
And not just that, but now we're at 15k. If we could see items, this is where I kind of feel like you're going to look at Parivision and see a whole bunch of tier 3s being bought and bullet dance. D-Mob for free at the secret shop. Where you get the kill and then can immediately buy. But I think if we look at it, there's probably quite a few power spikes for Parivision in the last moment being reflected now in just pickoffs. And with 2 free pickoffs near the middle, do they mid-boss here? Now 3, yeah, they got a mid-boss, Dan. Has to be the play.
It looks like that's what's happening. Okay, so mid-boss is going to go down. This might be a fast one here, CP, because even though the soul lead isn't too insane, it's just domination in all these team fights. Just domination.
No Obakim steal there either. Obakim getting caught by Play With Me on full gargoyle control. Juvenaire is going to come on down, and Parivision shouldn't have to worry about steal. Mikhail is lurking nearby. Surely Mikhail does not go for it. No, that does not happen. And Sharik gets caught on the outskirts in lane 4. It's just going from bad to worse right now, Dan. And as we look at what Parivision buys, the picture's not going to get any brighter.
Yeah, and it is really cool to see some of these synergies from Parivision, just like the juggle and stuns and disruption from the barrels and like into the Google, into the charge, into into Mo's combo. There's like so much like disruption and pick potential in this composition. It's pretty exciting to see how that plays out in this particular match. And Buff Enjoyers, I mean, what a strange comp that they're up against. I mean, if you go into a draft now, I don't feel like there's much adjustment that they can do for this.
Death Slam over and in. Goes on the Play With Me, who right now just might be, well, in a little bit of danger, but they get the Divine Barrier, might be able to get away just from the stat advantage they've had. But look at this, the chase down with airdrop. I don't know if Listic's actually going to be able to catch Play With Me. I think Play With Me is long gone. Lasso, meanwhile, again, the Ivy abuse continues. Obakim getting focused early in a lot of these fights. Prestus, meanwhile, over in Warpstone off the bounce pad. Now, taking fire in turn, just able to use Rooftop, get away. And Jake, we haven't had a decisive wipe, but still, we haven't seen Parivision kind of run away with this. It's not out of reach yet for Buff Enjoyers, but it's been one-sided. What do you make of it thus far?
I think Hayes has really done a masterful job like keeping this snowball going. However, there's a lot of eggs in this Hayes basket, and I'm a little worried at some point in the game, like maybe Hayes is unstoppable is going to be the next key timing for Parivision, because still I feel Hayes is vulnerable to that Lash Ult or Paradox combo setup, whether it's Wraith. I mean, there's so much stun control actually, and Buffenjoy is more single target focused, you know, pick off potential, but still that's a problem for Play With Me, is he's got to be careful not to feed this enormous lead he's generated. That being said, Parivision with the rejuve right now, this could be another moment for them to get ahead, and Buffenjoy is just doing a really good job holding things down, not letting them get too far out of control. That was their success formula last time.
Seismic Slam, Sap looking for a target. 2 members already down. The engagement a little bit messed up by Parivision. Buffenjoyers with the quick 2, looking to snowball it even more, make those rejuvenators get spent at a minimum. Saf desperately trying to get away, but that many chasing down. Abrams just perhaps too big to actually find a way out of, though. Making a run of it here in the subway, almost taking down Listic. That was, Listic not a fan of that. Great cube as the telekinesis comes on in. They'll provide a little bit of cover, but yeah, I mean, interesting thing here too, Dan, an item choice. Buffenjoyers evens things out with those kills. Parivision, meanwhile, has been really investing in survivability, trying to secure the lead that they don't quite have at this point. But you look at it, it's armor, metal skin. You know, the goal here is we've got into the, you know, latter end of mid game. How do you not die?
Yep. Yeah, and you have been seeing that. Play With Me is getting caught a lot in terms of just any focus fire, it will melt, but more Survivable now has that metal skin online, looking to try to catch this Ivy off guard. A lot of juking going on from Oberkim, really well done. It's going to actually prevent a kill from taking place there. But with that said, Taz looking to find Oberkim and maybe not allow any escape. See you later. Oberkim finally dies. And yeah, honestly, massive props to Buffenjoyers for keeping the game this close despite all of the pain they've been on the receiving end of.
Right now, Buffenjoyers, very heavy defensive rotation in the lane 4. They have the numerical advantage. Parivision is pretty split out, including the Mo, who's absolutely nowhere nearby. Buffenjoyers diving, may have bit off more than they could chew. Perhaps, nope, not quite. Sharik on the flank with 2, as a lot of the focus was on Zergy. So Zergy playing the role of bait and Sharik just cleaning it up.
Okay, amazing. We got a game on our hands here, ZP. Things truly are really even up, have been really evened up, and we got this urn being run across the map here. It should be good to go. There's not really much of an interception. A Play With Me cannot stop it by himself. So this looks guaranteed. True, fair enough. Fair enough. Yes, they're going to give this one up. And in the meantime, they're taking down or trying to take down the lane 2 Walker, but there's 2 players there to try to defend this. So it might be a little bit hard pressed. And indeed, they're actually going to give up kills in the pursuit of that one. And I don't know if Litz is going to be able to escape here.
Yeah, I mean, again, they were going for Zergy. Zergy able to avoid the pickoff, gets the rotation in for the rest of his team, and that might be a fast ball, but it's about to be a dead ball. No boxing gloves required for that one. And Parivision down 2. They were significantly ahead, Dan, and the game has slipped away. You know, it's still very in contest, but they went from being up, I think, as much as nearly 20K to now down nearly 10.
Yeah, and Zergy has been doing a really good job in like ensuring that he's staying ahead. And look at the kills, the kill differential, 16 kills to 31. Parivision with 31 kills, yet they are behind on the souls. Just again, this we talked previously about Buffenjoyers playing good fundamentally across the board. Holding on, having the nerve to hold on in this game, incredible.
Also, you look at the recent buys. Buffenjoyers has been winning fights as is, but both Sharik and Zergy just powered up and then some. However, Bullet Dance in. Mikhail is trying to make the great escape, still somehow alive at 200 HP. How in the world did Mikhail not die in the moment? Still ends up falling, but lives longer than expected. Now, if you're Parivision, you have to be so good at focusing down Sharik and Zergy early in these fights because the damage they're about to output is ridiculous. And they do just that. Zergy immediately dispatched.
Last is right here.
Well, evening things up again on the souls. This gives an opportunity to potentially extract some more souls here. There's a decent map control, something that needs to be, this lane 3 needs to be taken care of, so that's happening. And so the map control is going to be a slight edge here for Parivision, and it puts them in a position where, okay, they've got the Extremity Walker still left to try to attack, so it looks like that might be the focus here. Usually the Extremity Walkers are going to be the safer options, as it's longer rotations, more committed rotations from your opponent to respond to it. So, and also, if the mid-boss is up, you're less likely to have problems, and the mid-boss is about to come up.
Mid-boss is about to come up, buffs are about to come up, the map is about to be rife with objectives, but also, speaking of power-ups here for Buff Enjoyers and Import Picks, we got 3 ethereal shifts across the game, across both teams, and very tanky Geist with Colossus in play. So we've now entered the stage where, regardless of who you engage on, they're either going to be really tanky, Dan, or just shifting into the void. So Focus Fire just takes on a little bit of a unique turn at this point.
Yeah, and that has been, I think, in large part how Buff Enjoyers have begun to come back into this with that excellent focus fire in the team fights. Parivision need to be cautious not to get too split up so that they can really maximally leverage, play with me.
Oh, that's huge. Dan, Mo, Phantom Strike, it's bot. It's a little bit late for a Phantom Strike, but Litz's ability to start a quick pickoff vastly improved right now.
Yeah, catching back up on in terms of the curve of the game, back into a position of much more relevancy. And you can see, look at the teasing going on there. By that lane 2 position, we get a fanning out for Parivision, just falling off again. And Buff Enjoy is repositioning towards that lane 2, looking to see if they can find a fight here. They might get one, trying to protect that lane 2 Walker.
Both teams just being very cautious in how to engage here. Honestly, at this point, I look at Litz, I wonder what would Fluoride do, where Fluoride, is very aggro on the Viscous and also General Mo and Krill play. And this is where I would love to see Litz, do the sneaky Mo stuff where you're, hiding in a corner, a little bit more crouch walking and just setting up the perfect Phantom Strike combo for your team. But it's kind of turned into a more passive end of the game right now, Dan, as both teams are just feeling each other out.
Yeah, I mean, dangerous territory. The mid-boss is up, so any team fight that goes wrong can convert into a decisive advantage for the opposing team. So that caution, I think, is reflective of that fact. And we've got, again, because of that, Buff Enjoys mostly with mid-presence, like between lane 2 and 3, is like where they're mostly just sticking together. It's trying to react to the prodding of Parivision, who did have a bit more lane control. But the Urn, that's up right now, and that is definitely something that could force some movement.
The Urn is up, and you look at how Parivision is positioning right now. Normally, you'd expect the bow to be a little bit more up, but nah, it's play with me. Play with me. Still looking for terms of engagement. So is Mikhail on the other end. You see in the minimap, Mikhail leading forward, looking for a swap target. Carbine ready to go, and again, it's just the lull before the storm. And Abrams right now might be the target in Secret Shop. Gets hit with the Carbine. No swap here just yet. Saf feeling the pressure bearing down, it still gets away. And quick before the storm actually hits, Jake, your thoughts right now is the teams have been in a holding pattern for a while.
I think honestly though, this kind of stability is what Buff Enjoyers wants in the game. They want to slow down, they want to just deny any kind of pickoffs. We've already seen the last few big team fights have looked pretty decent for Buff Enjoyers. They've got a lot of damage now online in the late game. If they protect each other, these pickoffs are proving to be harder. It looks like mid-boss being forced. See if this is gonna be a fake though from Parivision.
And then mid-boss is going in, and there's nothing fake about it. The Rejuvenator coming on down. How will this fight play out together? Popping the Shadow Transformation. Motto very good at securing it. Instead, it's Demov. Demov gets right in there, gets the Rejuvenator. Mikhail on the fall through. It is absolute devastation, Dan.
What a play coming in from Listic on that lash. Absolutely saving the day, turning the fight. And well, this could be the moment now for Buff Enjoyers to send it home. We'll see as they chase up all the kills. Taking down 4 players, no answer there. Just obviously the stuns, just pulling everyone out of position. It's just too devastating. And Parivision now, they're going to find themselves suddenly very far behind, I would say, on the souls. I would imagine we'll see at least a 20k difference start to amount off the back of that. And the Rejuve is going to give full map control. The Urn is being run behind this CP, so it is really going to be a struggle to get back into the game now for Parivision.
Yeah, I mean, what was a small lead at best is now going to turn into a massive chasm on top of flex slots going over to Buff Enjoyers. I mean, not just flex slots, but First stage Patron, it's out of here. They're gonna leave after they get it, but Parivision now down to their last life, down in overall power. However, a little bit of cowboy action here as Sharik gets lassoed into the lion's den before the full retreat is done.
Yeah, a 20k difference is not unrecoverable, but obviously it is a fairly sizable difference. And now with the patron on its final stage, there is no mistakes that is really possible to be made here by Parivision, unless they obviously want to just lose the game. So looking to protect that lane 1 Walker, but that's actually feels kind of dangerous at this point, CP, because you don't want to overemphasize on that position because it makes it harder for you to rotate as quickly to respond to other things across the map. So you've got to be really cautious with this positioning in the late game now. So we'll see how Parivision decides to respond. But in terms of the scaling, who are we favoring here right now?
I mean, scaling-wise with the lead, you got to give more to the buff enjoyers unless Parivision can get a good pick-off early on. You look at what Sharik has been able to build in the last little bit here, where Sharik now adding Suppressor, adding Ricochet. I mean, the impact Mirage is going to have on fights, rather significant, right? But if Parivision, whether it be Play With Me doing just a stealth gank, nearly got him there, Mikhail on the raw swap, but, to the point, whether it's Play With Me on a, just a normal Play With Me gank or Litz off a Phantom Strike combo, Parivision, they need to pick someone off early in the fight, ideally Sharik or Zergy, I think, to make this flow smoothly for them.
Well, buff enjoyers, I think they're going to be much more cautious than one were with the lead. So, looking to just be very, very stable with how they take all the souls on the map. They collected all the urns. Now they're going to get rid of that lane 1 Walker, sending the entire team there. There's no need to split push this. It's guaranteeing that they get this and that there's no way to stop them. And then they can fall off together. So you just look at the team movement. Buff enjoyers are not going to give up this lead easily. They are going to minimize the possibility for any mistakes to be punished to allow Parivision back in. So with the mid boss in 2 minutes and 30 seconds, that might be the next big team fight potentially, because I think CP, we may find ourselves in this position where there'll be somewhat of a stalemate where Parivision don't really feel like they can take a fight because they're too far behind. But at the same time, buff enjoyers, need to try to force something to really leverage their lead, and mid boss can often be that thing that moves the team.
One thing too, recurring storylines, buff enjoyers last week versus this week. It can't be overstated. Zergy on the Wraith looks a whole lot better and a whole lot more comfortable than Zergy on the 7. And I don't think it's because Zergy played 7 bad. I think it was Jake's favorite talking point, but it's true. The 7 did not look great for buff enjoyers last week. Zergy on the Wraith, way ahead of the game, pumping out damage all game long. It's just a huge shift in buff enjoyers' entire energy throughout the course of the game, whether it be early or late.
Yeah, 7 just doesn't have the pacing or impact in the early to mid game. It just does not present enough, and so it makes a lot of sense. But we might get a fight before the mid boss here in lane 3. Parivision do have some good coverage, some good positioning to take these fights, but can they actually make good of them? They are very far behind on the souls here. They are going to be outgunned, and now they're outnumbered. The cube comes in to try to keep Staff alive, but we'll see how long he's going to stay up. Well, there he goes, and now the chase continues here on to Taz on the Viscous. Taz obviously will make the escape, but right now, Buff Enjoy is completely routing Parivision, and they're creating a reason to keep going.
Saf uses Veil and gets cubed and gets punched by Puddle Punch to try and make some distance and still gets run over. That is the little focus fire onto the Abrams. And none of Parivision could take advantage of it one bit. 6v5 power play right now for Buff Enjoyers. Combo coming on in from Litz has to immediately cancel or got interrupted, one of the two. Either way, Litz is out of there. Does not get value from the combo whatsoever. The KLS super low in the back, and now it's all Patron time. Buff Enjoyers, they sense blood in the water. Patron at half. Tass was able to kill one. Surely we don't have a Patron defense again. Buff Enjoyers all in on the Patron. Down it goes, and this time it goes down in the first attempt. Buff Enjoyers up 1-0 in our best of 3.
Wow, really well played. Again, just showing that comeback potential. Such a strong opening. We had, what was it, like 31 to 15 kills in favor of Parivision, really showing how to use the comp that they selected to like good advantage. But in the end, Buff Enjoyers, they kept the Soul lead close, and then they found their moment to just swing the game. Again, just really impressive.
So, of course, we're going to be tagging Jake back in here. Jake, you saw that beginning to end, the twists and turns, where Parivision, they were looking great for quite a while, and then things just seemingly slipped away, despite the heroics of Tass on the Viscous and Play With Me on the Haze.
Yeah, the snowball got going really strong there for Parivision. I think that was like exactly their game plan to really enable this Haze's roaming playstyle, play with me strengths. And it went about as well as you could hope for. But I feel there was at some point in the mid game, Buff Enjoyers adopt a very defensive stance and just start holding towers. They put Dimov in front of some of these walkers, and he just, defending into everything. I think there's a moment here for Parivision maybe need to back off from the full commit on continuing to look for picks and start farming a little bit more camps on the map, right? Start clearing their own jungle a little bit more when Buff Enjoyers gets that defensive, because honestly, continuing to try to attack Buff Enjoyers while they're playing the Walker Resist aura, they're showing up with big numbers, heroes like Lash and Paradox coming to turn the pick-off attempts under Walkers. That was the big team fights that really allowed the game to stabilize. And then it feels very desperate when Parivision does go for a mid-boss force. I mean, they had really no picks. They're just doing it with, Yamato and Abrams Unstoppables, which in the one hand I can understand, but I feel even if Dimov doesn't make the huge play and secure that rejuve, I still think you're going to get team wiped there for Parivision. I'm not really convinced it's worth taking a mid-boss, even if you do get rejuve, when you're going to lose a bunch of kills. You have to go into the pit. You have no advantage. You have no skills forced. I'm just not convinced that's a good play. And I think they just felt desperate. They didn't know what to do. Maybe being willing to farm a little bit harder on their side of the map when Buff Enjoyers takes the defensive posture. But this kind of like defensive, slow play, staying calm under pressure, Buff Enjoyers really acquitting themselves super well in this series.
Yeah, and Dan, as we look at the stats here, again, the one thing we keep seeing, which, you wonder, why is Viscous getting first picked? And I think Tass, even in defeat here, again, put on a showcase where top damage is Viscous while being hypermobile, while setting up ganks, while being in the front line. I mean, Viscous is the one hero in the game right now that kind of does it all. Meanwhile, the other end, someone that just had a miserable game in terms of getting focus fired. I mean, it wasn't fun to be Saf here, Dan. 10,000 overall damage, but also the main target in every fight, to where, you had to get shift on Abrams, which you don't usually get in a lot of cases, and get cubed and still be the first one to fall in most of these fights. There was a hit out on Mr. Big and Blue.
Yeah, it does actually make me wonder how important Abrams was to the playstyle that they executed, because I kind of felt like Mo essentially did all of the initiations, and oftentimes when Abrams came in, obviously Abrams does Abrams stuff, but it feels like you could have swapped that out, because the key initiation in those setups was always going to be the Mo and Krill. So it is interesting. I think there's a lot of learnings, because when we do these like recaps and reviews of the game when it comes to an end, we think, okay, well, what were the ways that we saw the losses take place? What were the defining factors? What are the things that we can improve on going into the following draft? And so I'm not convinced. I think like you said, Jake, there's a lot to be said for how effective the playstyle was. They didn't find the best ways to maximize the edge that they got.
Yeah, maybe even Abrams could have gone back to the jungle a little bit harder and farmed more, because I felt even while Buff Enjoyers was really giving up a lot of the map, they were playing on 35 to 40% of the map, allowing Parivision to have control. I think Parivision was just a little too kill hungry once they had already accomplished that, right? Prior to that, I think it was super important that they stay aggressive. That was their strategy. But once they were kind of trapping Buff Enjoyers on their walkers, I felt like they weren't really expanding the soul lead enough positionally, and instead they were trying to continue to snowball with kills, which I can understand given that that's what they're drafting for. But I think that you got to understand adapting to the way Buff Enjoyers is approaching this, because them being down 10 15k souls and just defending walkers, it's a good play, but I think the counter to it is not diving them. The counter to it is just farming the map, forcing them off their position, getting a bigger and bigger lead until you're so insurmountably far ahead that you can actually dive the walkers. And I think that maybe was the ingredient missed for Parivision, because I think you're right. Once they have that map control, once they are putting Buff Enjoyers fully on the defense, fully on the back foot, I feel like there could have been a bit more of a scaling, a little bit more of a greedy perspective And then, once Buffingers comes to punish you, you have to be ready. Of course, it's not like that's going to be necessarily simple or easy, but maybe there was a little bit more of a mid-game slowdown available for Parivision that they didn't find in this match.
Yeah.
Well, Buff Enjoyers, they are one map away from reclaiming the throne in Europe here in Deadlock Fight Night, presented by Intel. Do they have what it takes, or will Parivision come back and defend the championship this time around? We'll find out in just a few minutes. We are back here at Deadlock Fight Night, presented by Intel. EU heating up. Buff Enjoyers one map away from being champions once more. Of course, I'm ZP, joined here by Jake and DDK. And Dan, you're leaning to an even bigger point before we got to the break. What do you see happening here as we head in the map 2?
Well, I was just going to like piggyback off what Jake said, because he was talking about maximizing off of like all of these picks that was being gained right there in that previous match by Parivision. And something that I forgot about is that the scaling in terms of the souls that you get from hero kills, obviously that scales across the game. So you're not getting as much soul value from that. And so like but what you are getting is a lot of fear factor. You get a lot of map control. And so to not actually take the souls on the map as the bounty that you're creating for yourself is actually a pretty huge oversight. And now I'm just like, oh my God, I didn't even see that right away. But if that is something that they can address, that aggressive playstyle is extremely effective. So I mean, they may not have to change the draft all that much. Obviously, you're not going to ban out Hayes. Hayes was an effective pick. Mo was an effective pick. All of the choices that they made had synergies that worked. I think the only thing we talked about was, or at least for me, was the Abrams. I feel like maybe that could be changed out potentially, as long as you have the Mo.
Yeah, so Jake, as Dan kind of alludes to here, draft strategy-wise, we kind of joked around broadcast, do you ban Hayes, do you ban Mo? From how I look at here, I feel like you don't really change anything if you're Buff Enjoyers, right? Like, your game plan worked.
Yeah, I mean, they could just run it back again. I feel like, though, Parivision does have roads to victory. Maybe it's like some subtle changes to the draft, or I think if they can just, find those timings in the mid game to slow things down. And, I think there was just some of those fights, they're like pushing under walkers. And this is the counter initiation is really what I would focus on from Buff Enjoyers, right? When they've got Lash and Paradox and Wraith, anytime you dive in on like a Geist or something, right? If somebody else just shows up around the corner, saves Geist, turns the fight on with some control, that dive quickly goes wrong, right? And I think that's the bigger problem. Parivision, interesting, gonna first ban the Viscous. Oh, I guess that's because maybe this pick is just so high prio, people just know it's gonna go first. Because I mean, we've seen it in the last 2 series. Maybe everyone in the EU is just thinking Viscous is just the god hero right now, which honestly, I was saying the buff felt pretty good, but maybe it's even better than I thought.
Yeah, I mean, even if it wasn't the God Hero, Jake would take the propaganda and run with it as Viscous is his main. So, but no, I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? Where they decide you guys have first pick, where Parivision changed, by the way. They went from first pick to second pick of their own volition. So they're making a draft change strategy, and they decide they want 2 premium heroes instead of just 1, decide we're going to give up the Paradox, and now in turn, you have to wonder what they take away that Buff Enjoyers has been really clutching on thus far. And I think it's going to be interesting to see what they prioritize. I think they could go a few ways from what we've been seeing here. I think they give up the Lash, by the way. I think they're okay with Listic playing on Lash like people mean out, but they don't give up the Wraith, which I did not get out before the Wraith got picked. But look, it's EU. People value Wraith. They value Vindicta. You get Wraith, and then the second pick here, Jake, might be a little bit more comfort, but still within the top tier.
Yeah, I think Wraith is just such a strong character. I think this is like a tier 1 pick. I understand Buff Enjoyers going for Paradox first. I mean, not only is it a tier 1, but it's also Mikhail's, super comfort hero, and he wins a lot of games off the back of these opening picks. These like ability to turn team fights and even just the lane pressure. So I don't mind it. And the Calico, right? Remember that was first ban last time. So Parivision also valuing the Calico, maybe taking some of this hero. I think this hero's just been a really, really strong solo laner ever since it came out too. Gives you that option for like a bruising frontliner, like in some ways Yamato has been played, where it gets in, it takes a ton of attention, it has good survivability, and continues to put down damage even after you start off with that initiation. So I like this. You've got a frontliner that does a lot of damage, and then someone like Wraith who can really make use of that space created.
And one note as well is that Play With Me, before we you play with me as a Hayes god, it was the Wraith that really, I think, put Play With Me on the map, at least insofar as the DFN broadcast went. So very strong, opening damage picks for sure for Parivision. So I'm liking that for them. And it didn't really seem like they had too much of an issue dealing with the Paradox. Like I haven't felt like Paradox has had like really an outsized impact, or that it's been something that's kind of crazy for them to give up. So far, this looks like we would expect. The Buff and Joyce also picking up the Geist as well is something that you guys talked about. But this is an interesting choice as well, the Holiday pickup. So I'm excited to see exactly how that goes, because it's a really good character, and I think it synergizes with a lot of other heroes right now.
Well, I think what I look at here for Parivision's draft is that now you wonder who Prestus is going to play. And generally speaking, this would put them into a later stage Grey Talon pick, which if you're Buff Enjoyers and you've done your homework, maybe you look at this draft and you go for the mid ban onto the Grey Talon. Like, arguably you could say ban something like a Haze, but you don't need to do that in a case where it's likely Play With Me will be on the Wraith anyways. Also, the fact that they have picked Wraith also probably means that you're free to grab something like Warden, which actually went undrafted in the last game. I think it's probably likely gets picked up by Shriek on the turn now that Mirage is off the table. But, Jake, for me, the interesting part here is who Buff Enjoyers bans. For Parivision, though, I do wonder if they take away something like Kelvin again, where they took away the Kelvin last time.
Yeah, I mean, Obicum has been so good on the Kelvin. I like that shout out. Yeah, they are going to ban it out. I think this is wise. It's just like something that Buff Enjoyers are really comfortable fighting around, like playing around the Frozen Shelter, being ready to create mismatched numbers engagements inside of it, to open up picks, or the way they use it around objectives just can be super annoying to deal with. It's this huge X factor, really complicates the fight if you want to set up with some like precast ultimates. For Buff Enjoyers ban coming down now, there's not so many supports left in the pool. You could see them like banning a support and picking one as well here to really like lock up a lot of that part of the pool.
Oh, I like this. Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say like the Yamato, the Mo, like I think Mo seems, if just based off the previous match, seems like a great pickup in terms of Parivision for their aggressive playstyle, because it allows them to take so much initiative on the map with guaranteed kills off of combo setups. And the Yamato pairs so well with that sort of playstyle also, that just like taking it out of the picture, I think is kind of nice. It forces Parivision to kind of maybe pivot around the Mo strategy potentially. So I like the Yamato ban for Buff Enjoyers. But that opened up the pocket, though.
Also, I was thinking about what they like to play, generally speaking, and yeah, they actually wouldn't ban the Talon because I think it's going to be Prestus that's on the Mirage. Generally speaking, I think Mirage is in Prestus' hero pool. They just don't usually get Mirage that often. Pocket likely going to be played by Tass. So if you look at Parivision's comp here, they're good in regards to playmakers at this point. I don't think they're gonna, go for a Lash or anything. I think you will see a Lash potentially out of Buff Enjoyers because of how much they've liked running double playmakers. But the Warden also makes sense. Can
kind of take that role too, though, right? Like I'm thinking like 2 initiations, 2 catches with Holiday and Paradox, like great catch. I think that's why they banned Yamato, is that Yamato's this hero that like is happy to sort of tank the initiation, tank some stuns, and then pop ulti and turn the fight anyway. But by banning out Yamato, now anybody who frontlines, even somebody like Pocket who's really elusive, or Calico really elusive, still there's like some very long duration stun control silences. Even something like Holiday, you could be pulling people through the Paradox wall to silence them with the lasso, right? Like there's a lot of stun control synergy, and I love the pickup with the Grey Talon to put some longer range pressure, a hero that can like full kite and just long range poke at heroes like Calico and Wraith, snipe them down. I do think it's going to be scary for Grey Talon, maybe with people like Pocket trying to catch her, but she can just play so far in the back. Maybe it's going to be difficult to get on top of this late game long range burster with Geist and Warden frontlining for her.
Also, Dan, I got to preempt real quick. I would love to see them take Ivy here because Buff Enjoyers is going to pick Ivy no matter what. This would be such a wrench in Buff Enjoyers' plan, and Dan, they do it.
Awesome. And now really all that's left, I suppose, is something that's more like tanky. Again, proven that they have excellent Mo play. So I would love to see that to be maybe some way to round out this roster. And what does that leave Buff Enjoyers with for their 6th pick here? Because I'm looking at their lineup, and I mean they've got enough tankiness to the lineup, I guess, between Geist and Warden, and Holiday also gets in there as well to be very disruptive. You got great talent for the back line, Paradox for the initiation. Oh, okay, we got the hooks. We got the hooks for Talon.
I don't mind the catch potential Bebop offers here. I think this can be, somebody like Geist or Warden that wants to get in front line, could also be pulling Holiday away, saving people who get lassoed. I think this is actually pretty nice Bebop pick. Great talent as well. Is going to have to be always on guard for Bebop hooks. I think this is actually a pretty solid Bebop pick. A lot of playmaking for Parivision though.
We'll see what the final pick here is. It could be the Mo, because sometimes they go support mode. Oh, wow. This, even by comps that are low on support, is so rare to see a comp,
There's
like, generally
no
speaking. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know. That's the point, right? Is that you had the variation where you'd run like Obakim on the Vindicta as sort of, you know, at times a supporty Vindicta, though that kind of went away as Vindicta just, you know, became the true terror of taking over games. I look at this and I wonder, who in God's name do you put Obakim on? And the only character that makes sense to me here would be Obakim on the Holiday. And I wonder if you somehow play more of a support disruption Holiday here, because everything else, you know that Listic is going to be on Great Talent, Zergi's going to be on Furnace, Shriek will be on Morden, Paradox is going to be Mikhail, and Saf, I think, will be on Geist. So,
you know, now that you say it, though, I really don't mind the Holiday support. I feel like this character can absolutely be built prioritizing stuns, prioritizing control, and like not really skilling the headshot passive, maybe using it for just like pure laning pressure early on. Like, it's not bad, but realistically, like playing for disruption and catch with the Lao in the mid-late game, there's a lot of catch, right? And the worry is, I guess, frontlining and taking that vision aggro and like being able to get vision for your team. It's going to be like Warden and Geist kind of doing that without too much raw tankiness. However, if Buff and Jars can just have this ride it out with the defensive playstyle, they have a really high cap on their power, even if they fall a little bit behind. Like, if it comes down to those, like, you know, moments where they're just defending walkers, stabilizing the game, for me, Buff and Jars has looked really solid in those circumstances and just has not given up anything for free.
Well, take a look at it. Looks like it's actually Obakim on the Geist is where we're at here, Dan. So, yeah, I mean, this is quite the interesting draft, is what I'll say. Regardless of how or who it favors, we're seeing Deadlock evolve a little bit, I think, before our eyes.
Absolutely, that is exactly what I was going to say, because it's really interesting, because depending on the pacing that you want, like we saw in the previous game, you don't have to run a support. Like, there are trade-offs, and so long as your strategy encompasses the trade-offs, and then you kind of min-max for where you're really strong, and that's how you play, I mean, that can work, and we're seeing that play out here. So that's just another way that Deadlock is an awesome game. And I'm really excited to see the Bebop, man. It's nothing like a good hook connection to let the dopamine flow.
Also, the names got reset, and Jake, it is in fact the Obakim support Holiday, perhaps. So, you know, we'll just have to see how this one develops. But what else are you seeing lane-wise here in the beginning?
Yeah, I think you're right to call it the Bebop. It's like always going to be potentially a hot lane with Bebop. I think also side lanes, curious to see how Infernus does up against Calico. I feel like Infernus has can be kind of scary, I guess, to commit to melee range on this character, especially once a couple items come online that Infuser could allow him to turn. However, Calico's been a really strong solo laner. I think is definitely where I feel like she looks the strongest in the current meta. So this is going to be a lot of pressure on Zergi. He looked solid in the last game. I think there's going to be more pressure on him again in this game to win the solo lane and to at least come out with some decent farm up against this Calico.
So looking at the setup here, and already a quick little rotation perhaps by Mikhail. Just take a quick look and be like, if I could just put the pocket into the hole a little bit more, why not? I do love some of the early rotations you get sometimes, Dan, that can be used to just get small advantages where even if you don't kill someone in lane, if you chunk their HP, you do really affect the dynamic of that lane for the next few minutes.
Yeah, and just creating like a slight delay, or at least maybe an advantage for your teammate to get their first 500 item or two. That's going to also give them a little bit of extra edge. Oh, speaking of edges, we got arrows flying straight into play with me. That is the first blood there.
And this time around, Jake, we will give you your final thought here as the laning phase heats up. What else you see in here as the game progresses?
Yeah, I think this is a huge pickoff. I think Infernus starting to get a little bit of an edge here on this side lane. That's probably my biggest pressure as well. Great Talent and Paradox. If these guys get online, get their ultimates online kind of early, there's a lot of roaming potential, whether it's Great Talent just kind of roaming with the ultimate, comboing on a side lane, or it's just Paradox actually showing up for swaps. I feel this is a game where actually Buff and Jars could end up getting into a lead and having a very different aggressive posture than they had last game.
Well, you heard from Jake. We'll hear more later, but now, Dan, we're looking at how this sets up. Again, both teams kind of interested in taking these cross lane swaps. You just saw Listic going off to the right, looking for Parrot or Saf just running afoul of Zergy, and now lane 4 kind of a problem where you look at Saf 1.7k, Zergy 2.4. You have to think you need Bebop presence over the lane 4 sooner rather than later, just even if you don't get a kill to provide a little bit of stability, although hey, and within your own lane, a little bit of a hook, an uppercut, surely they're gonna finish it off. They haven't yet. That would be the great escape. They got away, and no, Obakim not quite able to shift the pressure there, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a perfect catch into a great redirect, because it's not always easy to like redirect the uppercut like perfectly into exactly what you want, but yeah, really nice opening. But I do agree, you know, we do need someone to help Calico Saf out against the Infernus. Zergy, you don't want Zergy to get too out of pocket in this game too quickly. And here we go. That's it. Just there we go. And into the uppercut. Oh my god.
Quick hyper beam on top of it. Getting burned down in turn, but able to stay alive. And you know, it's just how we called in the setup there, Dan, is just when you know your lane is behind, in a way you should expect that. It should have been the most expected thing from Zergy that a Bebop would show up there. It just makes the most sense. Although also Wraith under the gun. Mikhail able to just finish it off. Soft touch on to the pulse on the end.
Yeah, and this is a slow start we're seeing from Play With Me that we don't often get to see. Bird is getting sent out. Where is that going to go? It is looking to... Oh, Taz is so low, but it won't do enough damage, unfortunately. Taz will get out of there. Yeah, it really feels like Taz is going to have to be very active. I am quite worried here for Parivision in that, you know, Play With Me's had a bit of a harder time early on. Mikhail, let's look for the roam here. Going into the lane 1 gank up against the Geist. Oh, it looks like Pocket's going to get out of there, though. It's always going to be hard to gank a Pocket, so...
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the upsides for playing Pocket, on top of incredible roam potential and initiation and, you know, just a choice of most people of playmaker hero pools. Also, just Briefcase Cloak, one of the more reliable escapes in the game. However, again, now that we're at a stage where people like Mikhail are over 3k, you kind of end up glued to the minimap wondering what the next rotation is going to be. But also, we called it out earlier. What a turnaround in terms of Zergy versus Saf, where Saf looking way better in lane 4 on the Calico right now.
Yeah, it's not actually looking too bad for Parivision, I have to say, overall, compared to what I was expecting. And yeah, great work from Calico. Because that lane did look suspect for a second for Parivision. Oh, there's another connection on to a fantastic hook. The parry there to dodge the gun. There's no way. There's no way to get out of this. There's no way.
There is a way. Wait, hold on. Almost Casper cursed. The pressure's still a little bit coming in. Okay, zipline out. Obakim just the last little bit. However, while Obakim got away, Mikhail did not. So Parivision starting to slowly grind out a little bit of a lead to call their own. I think the thing they have to like here, Dan, though, is that you look at who's getting farm, who isn't. It's been a little bit of a slower start for Zergy.
Yeah, and that is actually the sort of opposite of what I expected based on the first few minutes. But yeah, really great ganking coming in. Obviously, we can't forget. I mean, I gotta call out just the Bebop performance so far from Taz. Just, you know, converting a lot of early hooks. Well, like 3 early hooks have been converted already, and that was the hook into hyper beam situation against Zergy too. And that was when Listic really started to pull ahead. Oh, just Listic. The Calico. My brain not working. ZP.
Yeah, the Calico. You're talking about Saf.
Just like scanning for the name.
No, Saf is actually just it's some sort of word virus because you know I forgot Demov's name and like Saf instantly popped in earlier, so it's just spreading is what is going on here. But speaking of spreading, or at least spreading out, you look at the middle rotation, Listic, you know, weighing options between lane 2 and lane 3, deciding where to go from here on out. As Jason drops a fun fact, we've only seen Bebop once in DFN history within EU. EU doesn't play a lot of Bebop historically, but you know, now mixing it in, Dan.
I mean, well, hey, when it's played, it's looking pretty damn good. So maybe we'll see some more of it. Another few barrels tossed towards the Wraith and the Ivy here. Buff enjoys. Okay, back in with a jump pad there for a re-engage. That's one of the reasons why Holiday is so scary. So at the moment's notice, get on top of people, massive damage. And also when you get the Warp Stone, pretty nasty. Okay, well, Wraith has an ult. Yeah.
However, they decide, nope, not gonna go there. Also, just the reusage of the bounce pad too. Multiple uses, just stays there for a while, but Mikhail does not stay there for a while. Mikhail simply gets bursted down and heads back over the spawn. So again, you look at the game state right now. Parivision, marginally ahead. In terms of who has the farm, it's also about as even as it gets. Distribution, we're not looking at any hydronation style distribution here. Everyone getting their fair share.
Yeah, we've got wealth redistribution happening live on Parivision's team. Everyone has 6K.
Yeah,
No one is allowed.
It's an equal society, unlike hydronation, where hydration and Leffa just claim ownership rights and skip a lot off the top. But looking at items here, nothing too ridiculous. Got a rotation here from Warden, Quicksilver reload, freshly bought. More bullet up time. And for now, just pushing Calico back just a teeny little bit. But also, a rotation, Bebop looking for the hook. Not quite going to connect, and with the hook down, free to go into the sky for a moment as Talon, or you'd think. Talon quickly thought against that, Dan.
And another thing Bebop's really good at is getting these picks around the bridge buff timings, which is about to happen. As I said, that stuff getting taken out, and Zergy, coming back into full force off of the Infernus. And I mean, they should be able to claim some good positioning here towards that right side bridge buff. But yeah, I would be looking and seeing, okay, what is Taz doing when it comes to those pickups? Because these are spots where you can get really sneaky hooks in, and they can really convert heavily. But looks like the bridge buffs won't be. There's not too much drama around these buffs this time around.
Mikhail, a little bit deadlier movement buff, one of the better buffs you can get on Paradox. I think arguably you'd want survival, but movement, more options to make plays. Right now you got a 3 of Parivision.
Oh, no
3 and the hook! Over and in. Is the fall through going to be there? Mikhail, gain a bit of damage, but also has the mobility to get out courtesy of the buff, so Mikhail should be A-okay. But also, you look over the lane 3, Calico just nipping at the outskirts looking for Holiday. And it's going to turn out there as Holiday. It's Obikim under a bit of pressure here. Telekinesis on the way in. Trying to move away. That is a lot of space being created before the telekinesis actually hits there, Dan.
Yeah, Holiday's got great movement for sure. It feels like Holiday. I feel like some heroes definitely get more out of their role than others.
Yeah.
As you well know as a Warden player.
Yeah. Trying to put Infernus in jail sometimes feels a little bit off, but yeah, I mean, it's been a very calculated game here. Usually in the mid game, you'll get a lot of back and forth, a lot of pickoffs, but both teams playing a bit on the conservative end here right now, Dan. Much more in the realm of chess. No one really trying to do anything with the urn here just yet, although a little bit of Mikhail pocket interaction. Zergy just throws in some damage into Ivy. Do wonder if Buff Enjoyers will go for the urn right now. It's posturing across the board. Shriek, though, in some real danger. The chase down coming in from Wraith. It's going to be enough. Right now, you see the counter rotation in here from Obikim. Drops a bounce pad. You can use the enemy bounce pad, too, for your own mobility. But I think in this case, does look like Play With Me wants no part of it.
I'll put the scarabs to good use.
Imagine if you got the damage off of it as well and everything. That would be kind of OP.
Wow. Then you'd be trolling with the hero with your bounce pad location, is what I'd say.
Fair play. All right, well, a lot of action here. And wow, it looks like you can kill a pocket. Together will go down. So, but still, like you said, the pacing of the action fairly slow. But Calico's going to come in. Saf here, they're looking to make life rather difficult. Ult is online though for the Geist, for Demov, so can't take it down.
I'm actually surprised Demov didn't power stance and just go for the swap in Calico's face. Might have thought other people were coming in, I suppose, but in turn, we get a little bit of Guardian pressure going down. Parivision down 2 Guardians, Buff Enjoyers down 1 thus far. 58k to 57k, and Dan, no one cares about the urn. This is the most neglected, just no one has any intention to grab an urn we've seen in a while. Kind of reminds me of the old days where like first urn didn't actually get a lot of play.
Yeah, and it still doesn't have that much value. But with that said, Buff Enjoyers are in a position here, 3v1, so Saf is not going to have a good time on the Calico. I mean, can't really engage this at all, but there is help coming. We've got Taz coming with the hook. We've got Together up on the roof, I think, so they're going to get in there now to try to catch these players as they retreat.
Yeah, it's a great call. The Bebop coming in off the zip line, and no hook required. Just bring out the orbital laser. Something that the Observer team actually loves, by the way, just because whenever a Bebop's in the air using laser, it's impossible not to look good. Would have looked even better if that hook hit, but hey, you can't win them all. Item update, though, here, Dan. Very early Warp Stone coming in from Holiday. Definitely one of our core items at the moment as Prestis just gets absolutely burned down.
Yeah, good trades coming in. A fight in the underground. Oh, I don't know if Bok is going to make it to the Curiosity Shop. Looks like he won't. Together going down as well. So relatively even trades across both teams. I do hear a bird. I hear a bird. And it's going to kill, I think, do some tower damage maybe. Oh, okay, well, another connection on that hook, the uppercut combo. Although a lot of tankiness, actually, a surprising amount of tankiness there on this stick.
Yeah, and in that case, it was just Tass there, and there was someone else, so it wasn't really going to convert into anything else. Telekinesis, though. Demov under pressure. This time, no swap. So this is more of an, well, it's not an honest fight, it's a 1v2. The uppercut hook should be enough to finish off Demov here. Living an incredibly long time with life drain. The life drain sustain turns it around. Oh, with the help from Listic on top, incredible Geist survivability, and you know that's kind of the semi-recent-ish life drain changes coming on in, where you know get more value out of it.
Yeah, I'll say that was like that would have been guaranteed kill before, but okay, the pressure comes onto the Guardian. These early Guardians still up for the most part. There is that Calico ult coming into play. And life not looking quite as nice for Parivision at the moment. It really feels like Buff Enjoyers are beginning to take some edges here. Warden, absolute Chad, just pushing forwards relentlessly.
I mean, there's something to be said for Warden players where, generally speaking, your initiation into being Warden main is removing your S key at times. It's actually way more nuanced than that, but when you look at it in a vacuum, it is a character that you look at as like, well, he is simply going to walk forward. But the best Warden's actually a lot more nuanced in how to engage and disengage.
Are you just saying that to make yourself feel good?
Yes, absolutely. don't expose me like that. In the same way that Obakim just got, bounce pad or no, brought down the reality.
Yeah, where did Tass come from there? Was he burrowed in the ground? It just appeared out of nowhere.
I learned a few things from Mo.
Yeah.
Wouldn't learn it from Lashley. You'll never see him do a death slam. There's some lines you don't cross.
All right, well, Guardian goes down in the effort, and there's not really any counter pushing for Buff Enjoyers anywhere else on the map, so that's a nice takeaway. Given the fact that Parivision were, I think, on the rougher end of things for a moment, they are finally able to take some initiative, get that Guardian down. They swap over to lane 4 using the teleporter, and they got more presence towards the urn side now. So we'll see if they have any interest in the second urn.
Well, might be another skirmish in lane 4. You see Obakim going on in, taking the fight a little bit directly to Tass and together, but it's such a scary fight to be in here when you have the Bebop on the other end, because as evasive as all they could be, oh wow, going for the urn. Is it going to be punished? No, it wasn't even looked at by Tass, so the urn steal comes into play, and it sets the stage for what could be a definitive urn fight on the other side of the map. Yeah,
I'm just trying to get across as quickly as possible. And this puts a lot of pressure on the Parivision to rotate, to give respect to this urn run. And right now, I mean, the positioning is not ideal. They're going to have to make their way across a little bit more quickly. However, Play With Me is in position, and I believe the ult is online. So, yeah, it is. Telekinesis is online. So that's not going to be an easy urn collection. And CP, this can sometimes backfire because you're maybe left holding onto the urn, unable to deliver it, and you just waste time.
Yeah, and in a way, you're almost forcing position, right? Where Buff Enjoyers at times would use Urn as a bargaining chip to push elsewhere on the map. You kind of take a look at where Sharik is. Sharik is nowhere near where the Urn would be, but Parivision also hasn't really bidden onto that. They're still spread out. They still have Wraith off on the side. No, Wraith has the option to teleport in at a moment's notice, and they're still guarding it with Tass. So, the allocation of resources here is very, very interesting, Dan.
Yeah. Okay, hang on. We got the Traveler being used to actually split push onto lane 4. That's actually a genius move. And Buff Enjoyers will try to get that urn deposited in the meantime. And so the fight will be forced here. And it's actually looking really, really good right now for Buff Enjoyers. Okay, can anything come of this from Taz? No, not enough damage. And in comes the bird as well to make life even more difficult. So they're gonna they tried to trade onto the lane for Walker as EP, but they didn't get it.
Not only do they not get the trade for Walker, but the timing there is so good where you swap the Bebop that you know is camping for Earn, you punish the Bebop, and you just ruin Parivision's game plan. That is just a complete outplay in positional strategy. And that also seems with people down a good time to say, Jake, you know, maybe I took your point there, but what do you think of what we just saw?
That was really nice patience from Buffenjars, just holding the urn near the deposit. I like that Zergy is able to make that 1v2 defense and live. I think that's really huge. I think like if they do find the pickoff, it looks like the fight's already getting going here. Ivy just gonna get out. Saf already going down. So Buffenjars kind of snowballing to a 10k lead out of nowhere, and Zergy doing a great job being on defense. Going to be rotating on this Wraith as well. Looks like they got Play With Me dead to rights here.
Yeah, Play With Me, that's a lot of yellow around one blue. And yeah, Play With Me, sometimes an escape artist, not gonna get out of that one, Dan. And yeah, I mean, the tone of the game now changed from that Earn fight, masterfully played by Buffenjoyers. Not quite the same juggle power as before, but you still see Prestus right now desperately trying to get away. Holiday, Hot Pursuit, Tornado, finally used as Depop still wants a piece, goes on in, was one shot away. Instead, Saf comes in on the follow through. Not enough to take down D-Mob, but enough to at least force D-Mob to back off of that potential kill as Sharik just drops the last stand on Taz on the other end.
Yeah, Buffenjoy is really taking a lot of control and going back into the mid-boss here to finish things off. And Parivision not with positioning to deny this, I don't think. They could try to get some kills on the outskirts, but everything just feels very risky right now, team fight wise for them in this position. Though they are going to make their presence known.
Ivy
coming
can
on
always
through.
steal. Ivy can always steal. Ivy with Stoneform doesn't do it in time. Obakim gets the capture. However, Parivision well positioned for the actual fight. Takes down two immediately, including Zergy. Can they get a little bit more? They get Sharik after. So even losing the Rejuvenator, not the worst here, Dan. It's just the mistimed Stoneform really hurts because they could have gotten those kills and the Rejuvenator if it was just a little bit earlier.
Yeah, it was so tight. It did look very strange to get there in time. And I mean, hey, they gave it a go. At least they managed to get some kills out of it as well, which definitely alleviates some of the pressure of the opponents getting that rejuve, because now some of them are going to have, you know, regular respawn timers. So you're not really feeling like you can just like run over your opponent and take the risk of just trading out, you know, having that rejuve advantage. But obviously, you know, you do have to contest with the fact that the buff's still up, and that's going to be pretty helpful, I feel, because you got the creeps there powered up. You got the urn being run across. What do you need? You know, you need that map control, but it might get intercepted here, ZP. The hook comes through, but it's going to whiff.
Yeah. Also, you look at the items. Parivision actually hit some pretty power spiky items between Divinier's Kevlar on the pocket and the Hunter's Aura on Taz right before. So the trip to the shop might have helped out a whole lot, but this looks to be a speed run over to the urn spot. And yeah, I mean, you do have Play With Me nearby, but I don't think they can do anything. They just see the moment, run the urn, get the urn. Big macro play from Buffenjoyers.
Yeah, it really sucks to Play With Me, who was ready in position, but just didn't have what he needed in terms of teammates to engage. And now we get the issue being forced on the lane 3 Walker. And again, looking better for Buffenjoyers in terms of how many people are here to respond. There's only, at this point, just Prestus on the Mirage, just throwing out those Scarabs, trying to do something here. And in the meantime, there goes the telekinesis. Can we get any finishing shots onto the Holiday? I mean, Holiday just so slippery.
You know, Obakim has been spending a lot of the game running away, but oftentimes running away successfully, despite, you know, just damage coming in from all ends. And speaking of damage, Sharik, last stand, chasing after Saf. You know, Calico's good at engaging, disengaging, but this is something you have to just absolutely get away from. Does not happen this time. And, you know, we haven't talked as much about the income trends in this game as perhaps we should have. And, you know, Sharik at 24K at the moment is kind of a problem when you look at how the front line is going to go here. Like, both D-Mob and Sharik in income allocation just make for such a frustrating front line for Parivision to deal with if they don't get a hook to start a fight.
Yeah, you're gonna need some really epic hooks at this point from Taz. Some like good initiations to set up those opening kills, because they are starting to, as you say, get pretty far behind in some of these key areas. And we've got Mirage doing a lot of damage from the side here, just just untouched. No one really seems to be considering this. Pressa trying to get as much pain in as possible, and that's a good pick off onto Demov. Is there any more to convert here? There might just be. I mean, the chase down is going to be hard, but we'll see if it can happen here. Hot pursuit with the tornado, but that's a flame dash. That's going to get out of there for Mr. Zergy.
Dan, so much of good Mirage play is determined by positioning, and that was some of the best positioning and angle we've seen from Mirage. They're just almost invisible, but laying in massive damage just from the side, and finding those angles and moments where you can lay in damage without getting hit back in turn, so incredibly important. And we have more items coming in here, and we've hit the point in the game where survivability starts becoming more of a concern. Listic picking up Metal Skin being picked up by Sharik too, and again, this is where Mirage is a threat. Better get more Bullet Skin, but Telekinesis in. Is the fall through going to be there in Obi-Kim? And the answer again, no. Hook ends up hitting Wraith. I don't think that was meant. I think that was for going deeper, just to hit the Wraith by mistake. Zergy though, winning piece of the action. Concussive Combustion already used. Dancing around the pit here. Bebop, I believe, the target of choice, and Taz not going to be able to get away.
Yeah, it's going to be so hard to get kills on the Buff Enjoyers now that some of those items that come online, especially like the metal skins and so on. A lot of the gun damage is on from the Wraith and from the Bebop and the Ivy. Yes, there's a lot of gun damage you have to worry about, so that's going to take care of that. And Sharik will go down. Maybe overextending a little bit there, but at the same time, his teammates are deep trying to take down these remaining walkers, and they're so tanky. Flame dash again to get out of there. That Spirit Leech is keeping Zergy alive for that much longer, but Pocket, surely not. Oh my god, it's daylight robbery again.
The Life Leech going against Pocket in the moment. Absolutely devastating for it together. And you think about swinging the game, that would have been a bounty of 27k the other way. Instead, Parivision finding themselves absolutely pummeled in turn. Dan, this is not looking good for Parivision. Our current champions of EU down in the hole, down in a map. And you look at the result of losing a fight like that. Everyone for Buff Enjoyers going to go back to the shop here, and big buys coming on in from the Talon. Sharpshooter on the line.
Yeah, and I mean, it's again, in terms of the soul distribution, it looks a lot worse, I think, in the total than it is in reality, because of, if you look at the soul distribution, Bebop is the most hurt, but Bebop is going to be more utility at this point, I think, to a certain extent, so I don't mind that. And you got Play With Me, who's got the most souls, then it goes to Pocket for Parivision. So some of the more key heroes here on initiation, damage dealing, just pickoffs are having the most souls on their respective teams, and they're not also that far behind let's say the 29k of Zergy, 28k of Sharik, and so on. So, okay, this is an interesting spot here. They're going to go for the deposit, it looks like, ZP, but it is an open area for Parivision.
Parivision, you have to hope you land a miracle hook at the beginning here. Instead, Lasso just going to be pulling Calico out, forcing Saf to use Return the Shadow super early in the fight. And while this is going on, Sharik just sneaks in the urn. Another urn for Buff Enjoyers, and Obikim going in even deeper. They bit off more than they could chew. Nope, Warp Stone's away, and Demov, deep in the thick of things, takes down Prestis, who's been one of the biggest sources of damage for Parivision. Shriek doesn't get away in the end, but these trades, overall, you got the urn for Buff Enjoyers. You're not that sad about losing two people here. Make it 3. You still got urn. You're still way ahead. You're okay with this. And at least for Parivision, it's not a full loss in turn.
Yeah, really nice dodge from Taz there against the Talon arrow, the power shot.
Wait. They can go mid-boss off this. Dan, the timing of this is actually quite bad for Buff Enjoyers. You have to think the call right now. Mid. Has to be going on. The question is there going to be any potential of a steal? I mean, Zergy has concussive combustion, but surely you don't go for the solo Infernus play here. That's the pub special.
No, just no. I refuse to believe that Zergy's going for this. There is a world where Zergy tries to steal this. I think he's going for it as EP, I think.
He's going for it! Zergy, one against the world, concussive combustion, goes in! Not taken. Parivision able to parry and deal with it, and instead they'll take their pound of flesh from Zergy, most likely.
Emotionally, I wouldn't have been able to survive if Zergy would have gone that. Like, just emotionally, my heart would just sunk through the floor for Parivision, but they managed to pick it up, and then Zergy goes down for it, which actually is pretty helpful because Zergy is a huge point of damage. Oh, great hook there onto Sharik, sending him straight up into the sky, and there's the telekinesis going onto Sharik as well to finish him off. He's going to go down underneath the Walker. Walker goes down, and no one is down yet for Parivision. In fact, maybe that play from Zergy, maybe that's a problem, ZP.
That's a long lasso, the long arm of the law grabbing Litz. I don't think Litz is getting out of that one. But the last thing I'll say on that steal, Dan, is that if Zergy had pulled it off, Zergy still would have had to go to the hospital in about 4 hours. That's how good that play would have been. But we're putting that to the side as Parivision, big swing in the game here, Dan. Not only Rejuve, essentially have evened up things in terms of souls. Our current champions of EU not wanting to go down without a fight. And you talk about spending some of that cash. The burst fires now coming in for Parivision.
Yeah, this is, I mean, the longer the game goes, the scaling is pretty nice for Parivision, you know, between you know, some of the heroes that they have. This is really interesting now that we've just evened things up. In terms of the objectives as well, you know, it's also totally even at this point. So the reset button was pressed.
Also, Jake brought up something where I was like second guessing, wondering if it was bugged. Veilwalker's alive. It might be 6,000, but it's alive. It used to be one of the most core items on Pocket that fell to the wayside due to what could best be described as soul inflation. But, you know, even though, you know, the price of eggs might be up, people are still buying eggs. The price of Veilwalker's up. People find a way to buy Veilwalkers. Sometimes you need what you need, Dan, is where we're at here. So, I mean, it will add a whole lot of survivability. It's still a good item when you have it. It's pricey.
Dude, that's a big bag. That's weighing him down.
Yeah.
1,300 souls. I mean, that it always makes me nervous seeing all these massive soul bags, but grouping up around the buff here. Oh. Okay. Having a conversation about who gets it, perhaps. And
it's
I think it makes sense.
No, dude, if I die, no, you need to give it to me. Like, please. Might have been the conversation.
Yeah, definitely makes sense that it goes on the pocket. All right, but the run from Parivision is happening behind the scenes, and this might precipitate a fight here.
See how this one pans out. Parivision back in it, looking to stave off Buff Enjoyers to force a map 3. See the Calico mobility in Ava dancing around. A little bit of Geist poke on the side. Tass desperately looking for a hook. Mikhail looking for a carbine into Swap. Swap just came out here from Mikhail. Don't think he caught anyone. And Parivision back out, and this is where, too, you can be a little bit more aggressive for this brief window of time. I mean, Swap isn't down for long, but it is down right now.
Look at the lane control right now as well. Like, Buff Enjoyers are truly on the back foot at the moment. They can't really extend out into the map very easily. And so this gives Parivision the most options of the two teams in terms of what they do. There's not a lot of jungle camps left on the map at the moment. This was a criticism we had previously, that when you get a lot of map control, you should try to convert the jungle across the entire map. And that's what they're kind of going back to do now. They're going back and are doing now. So they got a lot of control.
Also, again, you look at the power shift for Parivision. You just look at buys over the last 5 minutes, and it's a lot of blue in that feed.
Yeah.
And it's just what you see when you're behind by 20K for a long time, and all of a sudden you get a little bit of venture capital in the way of souls heading your way. You invest. You take care of things that were deficient. And although on the same note, Inhibitor actually massive buy from Zergy, just in the sense of what Ricochet Inhibitor does at, you know, just reducing the impact of damage you're getting.
Yeah, Inhibitor is very annoying to be up against, and it also makes Zergy a lot harder to kill as well. So we'll see whether or not, you know, Parivision can kind of find the fight that they're looking for here. Actually, there's quite a few players spread out at the moment, and looking at Saf's positioning right now, I was a little bit worried, you know, chasing by yourself the paradox. But that's cooled off a little bit. More repositioning for Parivision around the center of the map, as you know, more creep camps are being taken as well. So slight edges.
Very, very tense. And you know, when it's tense and we're waiting for the action to unveil, and we don't think it'll happen immediately. That's right, Jake. We've seen a big swing. What are your thoughts as we wait for this big team fight to occur?
I am starting to get worried. I do think Infernus is one of those characters that, like, in the ultra late game, like 50k souls plus, I think heroes like Infernus and Geist become monsters when they get, you know, like all these stacking resistances, damage reduction. Like the long team fights are starting to get pretty scary for me. And so honestly, I think heroes like Calico and Bebop might be falling off in the same position. Even Pocket, I think, at a certain point in the game, once there's like every single player has a debuff remover, you know, it's just not nearly as effective. So Buff Enjoyers, like, once again, they've drafted themselves a spot where they don't mind playing this slow and defensive. I will say a lot rides on the next mid boss. If you get one good team fight for Parivision, you're able to win that mid boss. We could see them convert into more objectives, but I think it is going to be up to them to kind of make something happen. I feel Buff Enjoyers are going to be really happy to slow the game down and not force anything, especially with Obakim being so elusive throughout the whole game. Oh my god, this pickup is dirty.
Just immediately evaporates Pocket. Together, crunched, and the timing could not be worse for Parivision. Sets up a 6v5, mid-boss underway, and Obakim, just mobility in spades. And oh, okay, not the mobility you want, not at all. Gets hooked in with the telekinesis and down. One good pick deserves another. Not the lasso they taught you about in Cowboy School. If Cowboy School exists, I just assume it does.
It is absolutely clutch, and so that enables a more fair fight here onto this mid boss. A challenge comes in, massive implications off of this fight. You see Zergy trying to figure out the target selection here to go for as the fight now spills back out of the mid area and around the circumference here. We'll see what Zergy's able to do. The flame dash trying to pick apart these targets with all this burn damage. His health now is getting very critically low here, trying to escape it. The warp stone coming online. The ethereal mode has been activated to keep himself up for now, and Parivision are falling behind. They are falling behind in the key fights, and now it looks like this could convert very easily, ZP, into that mid boss now that Buff Enjoyers have advantage.
It just shows the power of late game Infernus, as Jake was alluding to. The Unstoppable is a recent pickup. You get your full healing when you're an Unstoppable, and Zergy was just able to tank an immense amount, draw attention onto themselves, and keep Buff Enjoyer in a fight that might have turned against them with that late pick onto Obakim to really kick it off.
It does look even enough, though, if you surprisingly. Oh, hello. Oh, whoa, okay. That is not what you want to see around the corner, is that telekinesis straight in your face. The Geist gets the buff, but the buff is eliminated along with the Geist. And so I am... Okay, another lasso.
Oh, and Pocket just keeps getting bound up, and he can't escape into the briefcase quick enough. However, this time, there's not a battering ram of damage to make the lasso into a kill. At least it's a little bit delayed.
Oh my god.
Okay, Veil Walker coming in big here. It's like, please, regen.
Oh my god.
I'm shocked that he actually got that low after escaping the lasso relatively unscathed. Ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, the thing too is that the reinforcements was coming. He got out of there with the cloak, but then the power shots from Listic, from range. You can see how massive that burst damage is. It's so scary.
Ooh,
it's
boy.
Crazy we reset.
Dan, 220 to 220, and now Parivision, they're forcing mid-boss. This hasn't been to their advantage in the past, and instead, just a fake. They get the scream, and they back off.
Demos is down still, so you know they do have a world where they can have somewhat of an advantage potentially on this if they can take it down. But they were trying to force some kind of reaction. In fact, we'll get taken out. There must have been a hook connection, and now they're in a great spot. But okay, Demoff is back up, ZP, so you got to be cautious.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of want to push mid-boss up one, but you have to be so careful. Oh, word. I thought that hit for a second. That would have been just the dirtiest hook we have seen. But instead, Parivision, they want the 6v5. Moving on forward. Looking for anyone they can grab. Telekinesis is out. Mikhail is the prey. Is Mikhail going to get out? Obakim is one actually getting poked down in the back. Parivision laying it on thick. Prestis, the big gun in the back. But they don't get any other extra kills here, Dan. And Listic, though, still 30 seconds. They got people low. I think they bring this back to mid. And Buff Enjoyers, they have to immediately come right back.
They might want to pull off of mid-boss again here. I mean, that might be a play because it's enough time that Buff Enjoyers can get back into this. And they've used a lot of ults, but they're going to commit to it. The rejuve is falling from the sky. Surely Buff Enjoyers are going to jump in on top of this one. Is there a combustion or anything? There it is, coming in from the top. And it's going to be Parivision picking up the rejuve, picking up 3 kills. Oh, it's only Taz traded off at the back of that one. And Parivision are looking phenomenal.
That was tense. That was tense and then some, but they're able to withstand the concussive combustion and get the Rejuvenator in the end. Parivision now ahead. They catch Demov in the closet, in the like short bathroom. I don't know what you want to call that, but it's a cramped area, and Demov did not want to be there, is what it comes down to. And now pushing on the menu for Parivision. You have to think they want to at least come out of this with Shrines and first stage Patron, if at all possible. We'll see where this goes. Buff and Joy are still down 3 in Parivision. Plenty of room to work with on the push.
I heard a meow. I heard a meow. It's a good omen here for Parivision. In from the top, though, Listic up high, sending in the damage with the power shots. However, it's going to be up to the Bird now to try to maybe catch somebody off guard. And there's not really too many players. Well, nobody's really low. So, last stage Patron, the base has been destroyed. And Parivision are in an incredible spot. They've pulled back CP. They didn't want to overcommit there, so that's smart.
Yeah, Parivision going to back this up, which honestly smart given the circumstances. And you know, you get into situations like this game-wise, and you don't want to make a mistake. You have a very recent indicator of what can happen when you make a mistake in one win back in the best of one, right? You're also feeling the pressure because you are one map away from losing it. And also, take a look there. I think what happened there at the Talon, they bought Slung Bullets, sold it, and then bought again just off a double click. There's no other benefit you can have there. But Inhibitor up on Mirage is another nice power swing for Parivision.
And crippling headshot as well for Play With Me, so lots of damage output. And we're seeing a good reaction from Parivision. You know, they get what they needed objective-wise in the base, and they fall off, they convert the urn, they're trying to eat up the jungle. They've actually managed to take down a lot of creep camps like reasonably quickly. Still quite a few more to get, though, to extend that lead. This is the best lead, I think, that we've really seen now at this point for them. And it's still like a massive amounts of map control because the Rejuve is still up, so all those lanes are super pushed, and that makes it really unsafe for buff enjoyers. They can't venture out very far without having this feeling that they could just get picked. And one pick onto buff enjoyers, that's the game over. So they've got to be extremely cautious here, and that just means that they're going to be giving up more of the map. They just have to wait in base. You got to wait out the Rejuve.
And also at the same note, it could happen quickly, Dan. All it takes, one hook from Tass, and it's just over. So you have to be aware of where Bebop is, where it could be. This is also a late in the game thing where I would love to see the, the more old flavor of Bebop, something like Shadow Weave, to just anything to increase the odds of finding that all-important hook. And you look at here, Task could be on a lake in the middle of wintertime, a hole in the ice, and, drink of choice, just waiting. This is old school fishing, is what we're looking at the moment.
It's, I don't know if we'll go to 3 or not. Obviously, Parivision are in a good spot, but off of this one performance from Taz, that hook onto Holiday, when they were a player down around the mid-boss, that for me was one of the most important hooks that we've seen. But we're going to have another earn get run here in favor of Parivision. So yeah, really maximizing that Rejuve that they had. And obviously it's worn off now, but they still have the remnants of that map control. And so that's another free earn, another, just edging forward a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, every bit helps, and we'll be keeping an eye on item buys here. And look, you'll see it where all of a sudden, an extra tier 3 or tier 4 item is up. We can take a look here in a moment to see even that earn. What's next on the shopping list for Parivision? Probably gonna be some big items.
And we had Jake talking about the 50k plus threshold for the late game for buff enjoyers with the Infernus Geist. But if you look at Play With Me, 55k highest soul value on the server. But there's your shopping list.
Yeah, and actually, interestingly enough, in terms of where Parivision is, it hasn't converted into items from that earn just yet. Okay, Pocket, starting to buy an Colossus in for Prestus. I love this here because we can actually tangibly show the impact of what an earn just got a team. And what it means is Prestus, who I believe has probably been top damage so far, is going to have even more room to work with in doing that damage, more survivable. And should Task into a bad spot, you got the shift online. So proceeds courtesy of the earn, Dan.
And there's that mid-boss. Again, this is something where there's a big advantage now for Parivision to take that mid-boss, so much in terms of item advantages at this point. And so they kind of need to go for it at a certain point to maximize their position. And then that's also the best opportunity for buff enjoyers, I think, to create a team fight that could maybe go their way, convert into the rejuve, and then that's the way you swing the game. So that's kind of, from a macro point of view, like the main objective. And look at Taz looking to set up these hooks. These hooks have been critical.
Patience is a key aspect of playing Bebop, where you just wait and you go, you're looking at nothing, yes, but someone might show up. Someone from buff enjoyers could peek. And if they peek, they're getting a face full of hook.
Yeah, and just using the third-person camera there really expertly so that he would not be shown, but he could see his opponents walking through the veil.
Lasso actually on cooldown. I think there was a lasso that came out that didn't really amount to anything, but does limit Obakim's pick potential in the interim. And look at this, a little bit of rotation coming in from Saf. Goes on back. Mid-boss forced to scream. Parivision would like to force this as we back to the task cam. Not leaving the wall, Dan.
No.
Persistence.
Absolutely. Okay, well, gotta be so careful around this mid-boss fight. This really feels like everything here for buff enjoyers. I mean, obviously Parivision as well. Their backs are against the wall. They had lost the first map. This is map number 2. This is the final. Oh, there's that hook coming on through. That's gonna whiff. That'll be back in like 5 seconds.
In alternate timelines, that ended the game, but the fight perhaps underway in earnest. Unstoppable immediately popped. Play with me. Holding back here on the Wraith. Zergy running on in, concussive combustion. Right now, Parivision mostly healthy. Calco weaving in and out of the fight. Early shift coming in here from Zergy. Drops Unstoppable to get a little bit of healing, but most of it being spent going around the outskirts. Unstoppable now down, getting pummeled from all sides. Zergy gonna be able to get away. 300 HP, still getting chased on down. It's Ivy, of all people, in on the chase, 100 HP. Mikhail and Novakim are down. Zergy, 80 HP and somehow alive, but maybe the last survivor, Dan.
Yeah. The problem is that he had to just consistently be running around. He couldn't actually focus fire anybody because he had to stay focused on his own survival. In the meantime, his team's getting absolutely torn to pieces. And this is going to convert hopefully quite nicely into potentially the game win right now for Parivision. They're in such a strong spot. I mean, this is going to be it. CP is happening. Parivision are back. They tie up the series in the grand finals here. They take it against Buff Enjoyers and force us to a third.
Yeah, you look at that and you wonder, surely they're going to go mid-boss. No, you don't need to go mid-boss when it's this late in the game. You have that much income, and you just routed the other team. Zergy at that point might as well be running over into game 3. Oh man, though, that was back and forth. It was tense. But Parivision, when it matters most, forced Buff Enjoyers to a map 3 here in Deadlock Fight Night Europe, presented by Intel, and also things of presenting. Jake, present to us what we just saw, because this game, the twists and turns.
Yeah, I think you made a great point about the late game. Infernus being unable to stand and deliver with too much pressure on him. I feel like Bebop with the curse was just a critical factor in how stalemate that late game became, where, both teams were happy to slow it down, but the Bebop just always the threat of finding pickoffs, curses. I think that curse is such a critical ultra late item where, if you just can get the CC on somebody long enough to curse them, that there isn't really counterplay to that, right? Like it is that ultimate late game trump card. Got to give credit to Taz as well for how well he played in the early game, getting to that position where he's able to have big late game impact, to be a big threat with all these utility items, making him really difficult to focus fire down. That was a hotly contested one, though. That's about as back and forth as we've seen any matches go in Deadlock Fight Night so far.
Now, I got to say here, Dan, we saw the holiday come out. I'd like to hear Jake's thoughts too, but Buff Enjoyers don't win, and they don't win because, not because of, but one of the factors as they don't win is that they're not running a normal support. They go with the holiday experiment here. Overall, even though they don't win, I think the holiday experiment was quite good. Holiday grabbed a lot of attention throughout the game, and maybe it wasn't the normal support you get from an Ivy, but I think it's hard to say Obakim was necessarily the problem with the good lassos and escapes that we saw.
Yeah, the lasso, kind of like a almost better version than like Mo's combo, where you're able to like lock someone down with that, like pull them away further into your territory. They can't do anything. It is very powerful, and it had a lot of impact, as did the disruption from the barrels in the fight, and obviously the jump pad as well. So yeah, I liked it. I think it definitely worked. And this was a hotly contested game, extremely close. and I wouldn't look at Obi Kim and think that he's the reason on that holiday that they lost.
Jake, thoughts on team comps going forward? Where, by the way, we'll get to this after Jake's thoughts, but there has been a new patch mid-tournament. You know, we try and time things on Wednesdays to avoid it, but sometimes you get a little bit of extra chaos for your map threes. So future showings. But for what we've seen, Jake, team comps in this game specifically.
I mean, I think the Calico looked great this game as far as being that frontliner who gets in, gets vision, you know, creates opportunities. And then with heroes like Pocket and Wraith behind, following up on that. And then, you know, the constant threats from Mirage and Bebop to find pickoffs. I like what Parivision were able to bring here. I do think, though, this game really was on the edge of a knife at so many moments, right? You think about that hook from Taz onto Obikim when maybe he overextended after the Pocket pick. It's like, you know, if that goes a little differently, some of these mid bosses could decide differently. The whole game could flip. So I really don't think either team made any critical drafting errors. I don't think that's what this came down to. It was really more about execution in the ultra late game, which, let's be honest, at this stage in the game, everybody is still figuring out.
Also, we do like to give shout out to those supporting the stream, both, of course, our viewers at home, our sponsors like Intel, but also other streamers that are watch partying and, you know, send other viewers our way. Metro, I believe, just ended their stream, sent some love our way. So thank you, Metro. Dan, thoughts before we go to break?
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing, like you were saying at the beginning of the game, somewhat of an evolution here in terms of the drafting in Europe. We're not seeing that much in the way of supports. We're seeing a lot more like damage and like faster pace. I'm loving it, and I can't wait to see who is the better team, because right now it's definitely up in the air.
All right. Well, we're going to be taking perhaps a slightly extended break here. Production has to update. Players have to update. We got a patch in the middle of things just to ramp up the drama a little bit more. But the one thing you got to know is that the games are good. The conclusion will be underway. This is Deadlock Fight Night, presented by Intel here in Europe. The finale will be at you when we come back. It is time for the ultimate map here in our money match at Deadlock Fight Night, presented by Intel here in Europe. Each team with one map each, as Parivision looks to defend against the often champion Buff Enjoyers. Gentlemen, we've had ups and downs all day long, but it all now comes down to just one map.
Yeah, this is it's pretty crazy. I think going into this, and like when we saw the first map, I was really worried. I felt like Buff Enjoyers were going to sweep after that point, but today's been a day of comebacks, actually, now that I think about it, which is awesome.
You know, we were talking about like any kind of draft changes that Buff Enjoyers could be looking to make, and to be honest, while I don't think strategically there's like anything wrong with their draft, I think they definitely could have won that game. Honestly, for them, like I'm wondering, do they just either respect ban the Bebop or maybe with the second ban, maybe not the first, maybe picking it themselves? Because I feel like Taz was just such a huge X factor in this game, and every time the game slowed down, it felt that Bebop is just applying a mental pressure to your opponents. Like, you know, if nothing happens, I'm gonna get picks eventually. And, you know, on top of that, being able to snowball the early game, put themselves in a decent spot coming out of the laning phase. I think Bebop's pretty strong. Like, it's not necessarily like a first pick strong, but I think it's something really worth thinking about. They do go for the Calico first ban though, which I don't hate. I mean, Calico has won both games.
I mean, it makes sense that you would ban the Calico here because Buff Enjoyers, they will be getting first pick. And it seems like the EU meta right now is that if you have the first two picks, you'll get something like Wraith Calico every time. In fact, in this case, though, as our draft has disappeared, you know, a little bit cooking behind the scenes. We'll see if the Calico is still first ban, but assuming it is, right? First ban Calico makes sense because Calico right now seems to have incredible value if you pick it in a first 1-2 pick salvo, especially if you get a really good DPS like Wraith at the same time. Here's what I wonder, though, Jake. As good as Paradox is, given that Wraith has had enormous impact today and often has had enormous impact in general, do you, on your draft, can you make an argument to draft Wraith over Paradox?
Honestly, in general, I think Wraith is the stronger character over Paradox right now. I think people have gotten really good at playing around Paradox swaps or bailing their teammates out. I mean, both heroes like add a lot to the team. I think the reason that we see Buff Enjoyers go for this is just how good Mikhail's is on the hero. Like, I don't know that it's not that it's such a better hero than Wraith. I think it's more about Mikhail's comfort, his confidence, the playmaking ability that Paradox brings. But I feel like strategically, I kind of think Wraith is a stronger character because especially people are building the sharpshooter build on Wraith where you build like such monster attack speed that the small attack speed reduction on sharpshooter just doesn't really matter. And then this hero just does monster DPS from long range.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is that we're going to see I could see a world where we do get some of the supports coming in. For example, there's a lot of like different gears to shift to potentially. Just because we haven't seen that doesn't mean that's one of these teams isn't looking to just completely like shift up what they're doing. But with that said, I definitely agree about the Wraith pick. It's like the paradox is always important, and I wonder if I'm desensitized to how important paradox is because we always see it and it's always good. But Vindicta seems like it's just a guaranteed ban as well because it's just so painful to deal with. But with that said, like the Bebop pick, I wondered what you guys think. Do you think the Bebop was picked because of as a reaction to the Talon, or do you think that it would have been picked kind of anyway? As what I was wondering.
I think when I look at that, I think maybe a little bit of both. I think it's not bad at all versus Talon, but I also think that if you're someone like Tass and it's sort of worked out that you don't have access to some of your usual playmaking heroes, why not change it up, go for the Bebop, who's still really effective and probably underplayed in EU. Like, let's be fair. We talk about how within NA overlooks Wraith. I think historically you can make the argument that EU has probably overlooked how good Bebop can be, and it's just one of the differences between regions. So I think while Bebop is good versus Talon, it also stands on its own. But now, Jake, we got first pick coming in for Parivision here.
Well, yeah, Viscus has been first picked every game in EU where he's not banned, so I wouldn't be shocked to see it. I mean, it's had insanely good early games in both the games it's been played. It hasn't, panned out, but I'm pretty confident that the hero looks monstrous. I mean, how much damage it's been putting out in these games, how consistently it's getting an early game snowball going that other, heroes can really take advantage of. I think this makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I mean, Wraith as a response also feels like, we've been seeing Paradox get first picks, but I wonder if there could be a switch up like this late into the series now as we're into the third draft.
You could get both, right, at this point for Buff and Joyers.
Yeah, I would love.
Oh, right, of course, yeah.
Wraith Paradox would make sense here. Like,
yeah.
I don't think we've seen Wraith fall below the first tier of picks either. And with Calico out, I feel like this has to be Paradox Wraith, and you let Zergy play the Wraith, and you're feeling good as Buff and Joyers. You're feeling, I think, already way better than you did in the last map. Now, whether that'll be the case, we'll see. But EU seems consistent here, Jake, in their pick priority. You don't have as many ridiculous, off the beaten path player-specific bans that you get in NA.
No one builds an empire without sacrifice.
Yeah, NA players really like to mess with each other, man. I do enjoy that. I think that is really, really fun about the NA region. But yeah, okay, there it is. The Paradox Wraith comes in as expected, and now I'm kind of curious, what we're going to see in response here, because in Parivision have shown that they can play a lot of different heroes, but they haven't really prioritized the supports. They're more likely to probably get that Kelvin ban in again. I don't see that being something that changes, to be honest.
Honestly, for Buff and Joyers, I would love to see them take Kelvin before the bans. I feel like Obikim has been a huge playmaker on the character. It is a little bit early to draft a support, but you almost guarantee it's going to get banned if you don't take it early. And I feel Buff and Joyers has just made a lot of hay out of Obikim's ability to constantly heal, keep the other players on the map. I think like the impact isn't as hugely felt sometimes there's these big moments with Frozen Shelter, but just Kelvin's consistency, slowing people down, supporting, setting up some of these bigger damages. I like the pickoff. I think it's if you don't take it third, you're not getting it, I think was what we've seen from Parivision.
Yeah, and to that point too, right, is that I think you're absolutely right in what Kelvin has meant. And also, I mean, Parivision has been very transparent in their drafting strategy right now, which is that, hey, look, if we have the chance to ban Kelvin as a high-value mid-ban, we're going to do it. So you're right. This pick right now for Buff and Joyers entirely determines whether or not we will see Kelvin or not within this draft. Obviously, you can kind of go for other things like a Geist, where if you don't pick Geist here, there's a good chance that like Geist is gone towards the end, and that's why Geist has kind of been in the top 3. And again, they decide, Jake, they prefer Geist over Kelvin, although honestly, thinking to your logic, I think you can't sold me. I would have liked to have seen the Kelvin here.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, though, I think Dimov has had really good games on the Geist. I think he's been a stable performer. And I think especially with the Wraith Paradox draft, you don't have such an obvious Colossus builder that, like, compared to someone like Infernus, not necessarily who's going to build Colossus, but like who's going to get up in front and like really, brawl in the middle of these late game team fights. Wraith wants to hang, I think, a little bit further back, be a little bit more passive. And so Geist can kind of take that role. If you'd gone another direction with the late game carry like an Infernus, maybe you felt a little bit better about not having Geist, but I think Dimav's been a solid performer on the hero, and at this point he's probably feeling pretty comfortable, feeling pretty confident as far as picking it up here.
Interesting. We've got the pocket ban instead. So that does open up Yamato probably for Parivision. And with the Yamato, maybe do we see that Mo pairing again? That's also a possibility as they pair so well. And they already showed that sort of playstyle is super effective for them.
Ooh.
Okay, so actually Parivision goes for the ban of Yamato, interestingly.
I guess they were worried Buff and George would have snagged the Yamato anyway on the next pick. But I mean, taking all this Spirit Burst off the table does kind of raise some questions, right? Because like a lot of, Spirit nuking heroes that you would have wanted, I think probably and potentially in both drafts. I wonder if this does open something like a Lash up as far as like lacking the Yamato ability to counter initiate, survive some of those. Yes, Mirage can tornado out of the Lash hold, but honestly, and then of course it's the Calvin, right? Didn't get banned.
Yeah.
Of course.
What I will say though, just as a general trend in the sense where there wasn't really a lot that had changed. Can we talk about Shiv just going on milk card status? I mean, there's kind of this overtone of like Shiv having mob connections. I think someone actually just, brought Shiv out to the countryside and did away with him within the last week, as Shiv has just not been getting played whatsoever, even when teams, it would make sense in terms of frontline. And now they've set all of it up. It would be funny if he showed up. Instead, they go Abrams.
This is kind of a run back of their game one draft a little bit. It's a little different as far as some of the exact picks, but could see a Hayes come in here. If they felt like they should have won game one, had they played it a little bit differently, I think this is the time.
I mean, also I think you guys, you're talking about Holiday being that support as well. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we just don't see like a pure support and we just have that Holiday.
Well, in this case, I do think they'll pick up an Ivy, and the reason being is that when Parivision plays Holiday, usually they'll have Prestus on. Although maybe not. Dan, you might be right. Because here's the thing: Prestus usually plays Mirage, and Hayes is going to be played by Play With Me. So when you look at the overall roster for Parivision, I think there is a world where they decide, no, we're not going to run an Ivy at all, instead run the Holiday, because prior to the Hayes being picked, I would have said you could Play With Me on the Mirage. But yeah, I mean, the fact that Holiday was usually played by Prestus, but now they have Mirage, who's almost certainly going to be played by Prestus, it kind of tips their hand. But Warden coming in for Buff Enjoyers, I feel like, Jake, you have to like this draft for Buff Enjoyers, if for nothing else. This resembles their classical compositions. This is kind of a similar comp to what they've run over and over again for the last 2 months. That's, very frontline heavy with a lot of comfort picks.
Yeah, I kind of want to see them take a Mo here. That's like totally not what Buff and Joyers does, and I'd almost be surprised if they actually do it. But I feel like it probably will be the 6th pick for Parivision if you don't take it. I don't know if it's even worth denying it. Okay, yeah, this is like classic Buff and Joyers, right? Like this is the way they play with like a lot of these like scaling, threatening carries. But I mean, from Parivision, if they felt good about game one, if they felt like I did, that maybe they could have played it differently and could have leveraged the advantage better. Honestly, the Mo here feels like a great finisher.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I mean, we talked about the mistakes that they made. Maybe they got a little bit too... They didn't know when to take their foot off the gas after getting those advantages. They didn't take the advantages that were on the map that would have actually kind of been the conversion to get them ahead. Oh, they go for a late Ivy. So, okay. I mean, we also did make mention that do they need the Abrams and the Mo? I felt like the Mo made more sense for the aggressive pick-off playstyle, but hey, they are skipping the Mo and just keeping the Ivy.
I think the thing that is really interesting to me is I look at this as sort of wondering who is playing what, because now you kind of have to delve a little bit and wonder who's playing a little bit off, because just Mirage, Holiday, Hayes, what Hayes is going to play on. I think for me it's who's playing the Mirage and who is playing the Holiday, because generally speaking it would be Prestus playing both of them, but in this time you're going to have to swap it up a bit, Jake.
Yeah, one thing I'm honestly a little bit worried about, though, is like with this Hayes having a monster snowball in game one, like an ideal, basically dream game for Hayes, and it's still not coming together. I think some of those kills for Hayes come from the fact that, with the Mo setup, you're just like free farming full DPS into the Mo target. And I'm a little skeptical that Abrams can bring that same setup potential. I think it's just a little bit less consistent. Maybe with setups from Mirage or Viscous, it could go a little bit better, but I think the Ivy does give them a bit more mid-boss secure, a little bit more, like global presence. Maybe it lets them play the macro a little harder if they do get map control to be an earn runner. Viscous can do the same thing with roll. So both teams really sticking to their guns here, where it's going to be kind of like game one, and just Parivision kind of gambling that they messed up, that they can execute better and deliver the win in that match.
I know who's playing what here. I just had the look at rosters again, just remind myself, shock myself into it, is that Taz usually plays more of a playmaking role, right? I think in this instance, it's going to be more of a playmaking holiday played by Tass, if I had to guess, and it's probably going to be Saf in more of a frontline Viscous, based on how they've played before. It could be the reverse in regards to Saf and Tass, but I think that's what would make sense here. Wait, Prestis
on Viscous. I think
Prestis
Saf was on Abrams.
Viscous. Yeah, Prestis has played Viscous before, Saf on Abrams. This has happened previously, but this is even more discombobulated in who's playing what than I would have expected. So a lot of different looks here, Jake, for Parivision, who's playing what.
I do like this lane, Hayes Viscous. I feel like Hayes, can get really set up by some of these displacement abilities from Viscous, some of the nuking potential. I think that's going to be a big lane to keep our eyes on here in the early game with Viscous super early harass potential and Hayes' ability to just punch big damage from range in these open lanes where, she's not worried about her own life. At the same time, Infernus, kind of a difficult lane into the, I think Abrams is potentially going to be a difficult lane against Infernus. I think that's a really good matchup for Infernus. Abrams just needs to survive and get last hits, but honestly, you're going to get a lot of lifesteal for Infernus, and I think you can kind of out pressure even the Abrams passive.
Speaking of pressure right now, Dan, you got this in for Play With Me. One of the most aggressive laners we've seen. Charge in from Listix, and swing and a miss is what we got.
Well, he hit the creep, at least.
Yeah.
So I guess it's something. But yeah, Play With Me forever going to be annoying. But I do think it's great to call into question the Abrams Mo difference. I'm really curious to see how that's going to play out, because it feels like the Mo plays so much more effectively into the strat. But with that said, to be honest, Play With Me doesn't necessarily need a lot of setup, to get kills and to be a nuisance. He's very good at just finding that by himself, in fact. So there might be something to be said for that as well. So either way, it remains to be seen. I do like the Ivy a lot. I want to see those urns. I want to see every urn in their hands.
Jake, in terms of lane pressure, what do you think of a Warden Kelvin lane? It's not as bad as it used to be, since Warden used to have even slower bullet speed, but I do feel like the last hit pressure in a lane like lane 3 is kind of annoying when you're running that particular combo, because you're still under the Viscous pressure, but Hayes has such a big advantage in just gun prio for last hits and denies that, anytime you're feeling pressured in last hits, it also kind of makes you go out of position a little bit, which increases the odds that you do get puddle punched into a rough spot and thereabouts. It just seems to me inherently like a bit of a tough lane to play.
Yeah, I think it could be a challenge. I think the key is going to be just pressuring the Viscous down. I think Viscous relies on snowballing lanes, getting ahead, and continuing to pump pressure. But if you're able to pressure him, doesn't always have the best sustain, when he's dropping low. And then my opposite of that is Kelvin, right? Who can really, I think, pump a ton of heals and just outlast some of this pressure. Key timings are going to be once all skills are online, right? I think Viscous isn't that strong until he's getting, the Spirit Punch. And interesting double orange item for Viscous. I don't like this build at all. I would have loved to see a melee lifesteal and a Spirit Punch. I feel like these early gun prio spam build is not looking good, especially with this low HP. He's not getting any value out of Hollow Point.
Well, you can take the flying carry off the flying carry heroes, Jake, but you can't really change their item preferences, I suppose, if you press this. But thank you, Jake. We'll get back to Jake later on the match. Dan, as we look at it right now, still relatively even as Prestis was chunked down pretty low, now healed back up. Both teams, just looking for any individual advantage. Together, though, on the Mirage, a little broke right now, relative to what you'd expect.
Yeah. I am pretty concerned here for Parivision. Hello, we got a little bit of a charge, though. But that's going to not work out super well. In melee range, going to get one right in the face, so you got to be pretty cautious or get stuck. Oh my god, get stuck. Oh, 100 HP. Saf is going to fall off, though. Very conservative. I respect it. In the meantime, action here on lane 2 as well, as we get some trades coming in. Sergi getting the better of Taz, playing one of the duo lanes instead of being on the solo lane. But yeah, I just wanted to mention CP. I feel very confident in Buff and Joy's comp here. If this feels like it scales so well, it feels like it's good at every portion of the game.
There's not a lot of weakness when you look at it. They're covered in the late game between the Infernus and the Wraith. They're early in the mid game with Geist, Ward, and Paradox is solid. I mean, yeah, they're not going to lose on comp, so to speak. But also, look at this. Play With Me special. In over from the outskirts. Demov almost certainly going to go down. Just far too much damage off that rotation. And this is what Play With Me does on Hayes. It is the most mobile Hayes player in the world. Feel good about saying that. Bullet dance for another, and again, if you're buff enjoyers and you're looking at situations you want to avoid, a farmed play with me is one of those situations. Rotation though, over and in from the Wraith. Saf not quite able to get away.
Yeah, Holiday coming in there to maybe get a trade, but not looking too successful. Buff Enjoy is able to get away with that one. And in fact, it might just get worse here because the insistence came in and the assistance was quickly dealt with. So Parivision not having a good time of it off the kills. There's a lot of tower damage actually that's going to go also the way of Buff Enjoyers onto lane 1 here.
Also, rotations might not be done yet. Litz ziplining in. 3 for Parivision on lane 1. Buff Enjoyers had 3, now rotating 2 back over in the lane 2. And it looks like lane 1 is going to go back, be a little bit sleepy here. Back to just Abrams and Furnace. Meanwhile, looking here at Prestus, who I expect to play a bit of an active Viscus here. Maybe not as active as when you get your playmaking players on it, but still, you know, the theme today for Viscus is no matter who's playing it, you're just all over the place map-wise. You are constantly looking to make plays, and at 3.9k, this is where you effectively can go anywhere, which is part of why you put it in the duo lane.
Yeah, totally agree. That's your lane. You want those mobile heroes. Gives you a lot of map control. Gives you a lot of assistance onto those solo lanes. Like winning those solo lanes is obviously really key. And you know, Demov is definitely not having the best time of things. You know, speaking of solo lanes, you know, up against the Mirage and together. Actually, quite far behind. The most behind player, I suppose. Or Listic as well. Often enjoys.
The biggest telekinesis of all time, I think.
Yeah, that's very high.
Okay, I think what must have happened there is Seismic Slam came in and then the telekinesis just snatched Saf midair. That's the only thing I can think of to explain what we just saw with Abrams getting the big slam and not his usual slam, the slam caused by Wraith. Ridiculous.
True. Although Abrams does kind of look like one of those characters from Space Jam.
Yeah,
like one of the monsters. And they can jump pretty high, so...
Or if you believe the propaganda by chat, also me, where apparently all I have to do is just paint my skin blue and add a few horns, and you'll never know the difference. Is what I've been hearing. It's what people say in chat.
Seems reasonable. Well,
might have to find a book though. Need to read more of those.
Oh yeah, true. You need a big book too.
Yeah.
No wonder his arms are huge. But in goes Mikhail S. There's a good swap coming in, and I don't think that's going to be enough though. Just annoying. It's just annoying. That's all it is.
It sends a message, just says, hey, you know, I'm here, aware of what you're trying to do. But get our first item check-in of the game here, and nothing too off the beaten path. Obviously, you get core items like Quicksilver Reload on Morden, which you kind of expect to have at this point in the game because it's super, super important for your actual bullet damage uptime. But just pressure onto lane 1 from Parivision, looking for their first Guardian. You got rotations, though, coming on in. Zergy and Mikhail perhaps putting an end to it, but the rotation is sniffed out there, Dan. You see both Holiday and Abrams go, no, like Tass and Seth back it up a little bit, but then they go back forward. Looking for Listic here. Gets the lasso from afar. Lasso into charge. Listic got the business.
Very well done. Very well done indeed. And especially because I feel like Saf has not been having the easiest time here, but Listic isn't really getting ahead, especially after a kill like that. That definitely helps to even up this solo lane, put the pressure on. Barrel's coming in. Hello. Okay, Mikhail S might be in a little bit of trouble at the moment. Just stuck on the head of the Brazier on top of the Guardian as he tries to like dodge his way around, just jumping across everything, just on the walls, double jumps, wall jumps, all the jumps. And now we got the Google inside a frozen shelter.
And Prestus is okay with that. You want to drop the shelter? I will turn it into my own personal Thunderdome. Listic falling again. You talk about falling behind. That's 2 deaths back-to-back for Listic. Completely paralyzing the farm on Infernus. Not the best look. Meanwhile, Prestus getting more active on map rotations as Tash just not able to get away as Mikhail came back in.
All right, so Parivision doing a pretty decent job actually early on, and you know, keeping the important players down. You know, Demov is down, Listic is down in terms of the souls. You know, Zergy though, he's doing a good job obviously on that Wraith for the time being.
Well, you have to pick and choose who you want to keep down, and I actually think of all the heroes, Infernus is the one you try and keep down the most, purely because Infernus is the one that's most farm reliant. Even if a Wraith is having a bad game, they're still going to have key moments with telekinesis. But if you're broke as Infernus heading into the mid game, your performance is just terrible at that point. So, yeah, I mean, if you're thinking who you want to make have a awful game or have to really work for it, you 100% isolate the Infernus every time.
Yep, makes total sense to me. Especially, the amount of Infernus that I've played definitely doesn't feel good. If you miss the window where you're very impactful in the mid game if you can't farm up enough. But ooh, the jump pad maybe getting out there into another jump pad, and we've got some dashes available as well, sliding with a healing right coming into play as well. So daring escape from Taz.
It is unbelievable how slippery Holiday has been in this tournament.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Abrams having Seismic Slam to get out of there. Play with me. Just peppering out the damage here in lane 3. Not enough to save the Guardian. Swapping back over to Viscus's point of view, and things calming down for a moment. 47k to 44k. Buff Enjoyers getting a little bit more done on push here so far, reflected in 1 Guardian thus far. Gale playing around the time wall, drops the Carbine. Lane 1, a little bit of pressure going on, Dan, but nothing critical just yet.
No, nothing to be concerned about. It's just some poking currently. But be careful on these lanes though, because yeah, there's a lot of ability to just charge. You get a tornado initiation into a charge, and you can kind of guarantee a lot of damage off of that. So Buff Enjoy is respecting that. Quick TP coming into assist lane 4. A lot of action here close to the Guardian. Is that assist going to end up helping out 2 players if through the TP here to deal with Buff Enjoy's push?
Parivision is rotating 4 over. They want numerical advantage. Play with me, going to be the one to finish it off if Buff Enjoyers can't retreat in time. But I think they know what's coming and do get out of there. Play with me decides instead to take the free farm on lane 3. Urn, of course, has been spawned for quite a bit, and so far neither team too keen on the first Urn. But since we got a pause, perhaps a disconnect, Jake, you've been watching all of this. What are your insights so far, and what has been an even game thus far?
Yeah, it's a really tight one here coming out of the laning phase, but I feel like these couple tower pickoffs are really massive. That Buff Enjoyers was able to get back. Despite having 3 players in the lane, they're able to recognize that Parivision brought numbers, brought 4. They all get out. I think them surviving there is actually huge. It enables the tower take on lane 1, which was big considering it looked like Listic was going to be the one to lose that tower first. Buys a lot of space for, as you guys were mentioning, like Infernus, that farm issue. It's going to buy him a lot more space now if he wants to back and maybe jungle just a little bit more. Still a little bit of a struggle right now for Parivision to get some more of these Guardians down. They really do need to get a flex slot open up soon, and they're kind of 0 out of 4 on the progress there. I think this lane pressure is going to start to bite. Maybe they're going to force something now, but a few more minutes of Buff Enjoyers just dancing and defending well. That's been their strength as a team, and things could get scary for Parivision. So gonna need to find some pickoffs. I think getting Hayes active as well, snowballing, but she's not nearly that menace that she was in game 1.
Yeah, I think it's still interesting that Play With Me is at the sole difference that they're at as a Hayes, where again, you don't see it as often. But you make a great point when it comes to the inevitability of flex slots here, where Buff Enjoyer is very close to getting their first flex slot, whereas it really does impact your item build quite significantly if you get to about 15, 16 minutes, Dan, and you don't have your first flex slot. All of a sudden it becomes, what items would I normally like to have do I now need to sell early to get a item of higher priority? It never feels good to do that level of triage just because you've fallen behind in your current pushing progress.
Yeah, it definitely creates a lot of problems. And it also, in some cases, you might not feel like you want to sell something. You might opt to say, okay, well, maybe we'll be able to actually get the flex slot somewhat soon. So it just ends up delaying your ability to grow with your economy. So yeah, it's it's horrendous.
Well, we had the pause into the readies, into the pause.
Classic bait and switch.
Oh, Listic crashed. Okay. So it's not Shariq. Chat, you can stop spamming Shariq. I've been seeing, people see Shariq getting spammed in game. They go to it in chat right after. I mean, honestly, the person that probably feels they're off the hook is Jake, because there used to be a world where Jake couldn't go into any stream at any point for years and years without being like JLOLKE the entire time,
Guaranteed Chad's going to spam that.
Of course. I mean, I know what I'm doing when I bring that up. I know exactly what I'm doing, but you can't get off the hook for that long. Come on, man.
I thought I was on into a new era here in Deadlock. I thought the sins of the past could be forgotten, but ZP won't let me live anything down.
No,
here.
absolutely not. Look, we're paused. We have to fill for time. We're going to go down some very old paths the longer this pause goes. That's all I know.
So what's the story behind that, huh? What's the... Oh, okay, they're ready. Yes, okay, saved.
Another time.
Day,
right?
another day, Dan.
As Jake just like, never bring it up. But here we go, Dan. We are back in progress. Buff Enjoyers versus Parivision. So far, even on both sides. It's Mirage, though, under a bit of fire, quite literally. Now turning the favor back over to Infernus, and Listic unable to get away, and the pain just continues for Listic, where I think it was Jason bringing up that, you know, Infernus not exactly a normal pick of Listic, so it's not in his usual hero pool repertoire, and maybe feeling a bit of the burn from that right now, no pun intended.
Well, the Guardian going down. Very, very nice indeed. We are moving into... Well, we're actually moving into like proper mid-game territory here as well, where we're finishing off these early Guardians. There's still 3 to be claimed by Buff Enjoyers, actually, a little bit further behind compared with Parivision, despite the fact that Parivision is actually behind on souls. They are ahead on objectives, so that does indicate that Buff Enjoyers are... I think, you know, the game plan is kind of going according to plan. Nice barrel, actually, a lot of damage there, headshot as well, but that won't stop this inevitable fact, CP. These Guardians are going down.
Yeah, and that's a flex slot opened up for Buff Enjoyers, and Parivision still a ways to go. So even though it has been the struggle city for Listic in some regard, now being reflected in Souls at 9K, tied for lowest, the overall macro game for Buff Enjoyers is still good. The overall economy is still good. So it's something they can recover from. As Preston, wait, Prestus gets the cube. Okay, telekinesis timed after, absolutely no way out. But the fact that it came close, still interesting, as Buff Enjoyers looking to add on to their lead right now, Dan. Maybe they grab the urn, maybe not. We'll see. And okay, they want to go mid-boss.
There's no way. That's got to be a troll. You're actually going for it, though, it looks like. And, I mean, alchemical fire coming out as well. And, wow, this is not what you expect to see at this time in the game. Off of that pick onto Prestus, they are going for it. And this might be a bit of shock for Parivision, but what are they going to do? They have to react. They have to respond. In comes the Rejuve, dropping from the ceiling. And here it comes the dive into the Kelvin. To actually slow things down a little bit. Who's going to get the punch? Oh, there's the keeper for Saf. Parivision get the steal DP.
Dan, how in the world did Saf get that? Saf missed the first punch, came back in, landed the second. I mean, Parivision is just absolutely demolished after getting it, so you can't really say that they're ahead, but it could have, it probably should have been far worse, and somehow they get it. I couldn't tell if someone came in with a parry or what. Jake, I'll tap you in because we got a moment. Did you see what happened?
Yeah, it looks like the Abram was able to pin them away, so they're able to get the last hit. I feel like this frozen shelter, I wonder, was this really necessary from Obikim? It felt like there was a moment where Buff Enjoyers were kind of in control of the Rejuve drop location, and yet they go for the frozen shelter anyway, maybe expecting something like Abrams to commit spells early, but well played by Saf to get the Rejuve. Like you said, though, the full team wipe, I mean, Buff Enjoyers, I think, yeah, you would have loved to get the Rejuve, but you're still feeling good about that. They still have a pretty enormous soul lead for this stage of the game.
Yeah, I mean, seeing the replay really put in the action. I thought there was someone else near the Rejuve that could have grabbed it, but he really did just grab everyone on the charge. Now you look at the purchases coming on in. You got Burst Fire in on Zergy now, one of the most important power spikes on Wraith. So the next few fights for Parivision just going to be so difficult to play around, unless you can, you know, Dan, maybe isolate Zergy out early, but easier said than done.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to get, well, hold that thought. Here comes that ult from Wraith, and I mean, it's going to be very hard to survive. But Wraith actually not super healthy. You're in a very enclosed space in that corridor, so opting to back away, reposition, and looks like no kills will be traded just yet. Saf able to escape, so I was going to say, you know, like having the Rejuve still at least does give some more map control here to Parivision. That should be more farm, that should be going their way, and also increase their ability to sort of pressure across the map. And given the fact that they do have, obviously, Together, who's got the Traveler, that's about to come online as well. You can really get your split pushing on in a scenario like this. But there is a lot of focus around mid at the moment from both teams.
I think one thing for Parivision that isn't too bad when you look at who's at the farm, a lot of their key members are still in it. Even the Abrams at 10K is like not in the catastrophic Abrams is merely a stun bot category, right? Like Saf has stayed in it enough farm-wise. Play With Me still a threat.
Double earn.
You look at where, yeah, you look at where the urn is. I don't know. We've seen everything. We've seen fake urns. We've seen real urns. I don't know if we have 2 urns in progress or not right now. What we do have is Zergy running for their lives off the teleport. Looks to be out of it as Prestis, meanwhile, gets caught on the other side. The urn that's getting picked up right now should be real. I don't know if the other urn is real. I suppose we'll see.
They were just outside of the threshold where it would be a more even drop-off point. So they invested this time to Buff and Joyce to like grab this urn, only to find out that, hey, this is going to be deep in enemy territory. It looks like, I mean, they are carrying it across. This is an easy defense, presumably, for Parivision. They do have some players in position.
Well, one of the downside... Oh, Sharik gets caught way before. Now you definitely don't want to contest and go for that as... Oh, lasso into charge. I love the combo between Abrams and Holiday here, and it's something that Obakim should not get away from. Does not. And the urn going to be grabbed here by Prestis, turned in for Parivision. Dan, they are right back in it. I do wonder if that other urn is real, if we're dealing with like a pinball multi-ball situation.
Right.
I mean, it looks like it's there.
Looks like it's there, yeah. I don't know, but that was what a great series of moments there for Parivision. If you look at what happened across the map, the urn pickup obviously getting converted by them. It was like delivered by Buff and Joyce, converted by Parivision. In addition, and that was obviously due to the lasso. Obakim just didn't have enough teammates nearby to protect him from that pickoff. So, okay, things are evening up once again after what looks, I mean, pretty desperate for a while for Parivision. It was so desperate that 13 minutes or whatever it was, Buff and Joyce were like, yeah, we'll do mid-boss off 1 kill.
Yeah, and I mean, just like that, the game is even again. In terms of late game between both teams, I would still say there's a late game edge for Buff and Joyce should it go truly late, just because of Infernus and Wraith, which I'd still take over Holiday and Mirage if you really put them head to head. But there's a long way to go till we get to true late game. In a lot of ways that characters like Viscus and Holiday can make the difference. Where especially, I mean, I kind of like Taz and Saf being each other's best buddies for a lot of this. But hold the phone, Play With Me in Bullet Dance. Gets swapped. It's not going well for Play With Me at all. Just completely denied by Sharik and Mikhail.
Yep, that's the perfect ability to force field to like juke the Haze ult. Couldn't ask for a better ability. And that's going to be a 5k difference across both teams, so not really that much of a soul difference. And if we look at the objectives, it's just even, totally even. But that could be about to change here. 3-player pressure from Buff and Joyce onto a lane for Walker.
Yeah, I see the Walker pressure coming in from Buff and Joyce again, playing the macro game, but the lasso into the Walker stop. That is a bad day if I ever saw one. Listic falling in turn, Sharik, I think trying to commit for Walker isn't going to be able to get it before falling. Actually, I think the Walker did fall, yeah. But it gave his life for it, so on the edge. Still seeing a lot of value off lasso today, whether a team is winning or losing, but Tass finding the right moment there right before the stomp down.
Yeah, and Parivision, not only did they get the kills there, obviously the Walker went down, they got the kills on lane 4, they also defended successfully with Together against the split push that was happening. It's just a solo split push, but it's happening towards the lane 1 Walker. So just, yeah, able to convert, and it was a 7k difference, I think, 8-8k, and now it's basically even, dead even. So Parivision with some edges, and Play With Me looking for the gank off of the smoke bomb, as he does.
Yeah, Mikhail just... getting out of there in a hurry. But also you look at some of the items being bought here, and Kiro's coming online. Once Viscus gets Warpstone, melee charge, I mean, it's definitely a level where Viscus not only going to be putting out more damage, but is also more evasive, and as a result can go for even more aggressive plays, right? And Prestis, as is, has been sort of pushing the limit, so, seeing the next few minutes for Viscus should be interesting. I think Prestis might just be going straight in on Infernus here, but instead, it's a 2-for-1 special in lane 1. Does the cube early. Don't know if Prestis is getting out of this one. We'll see. Goes for the puddle punch escape movement. Nope, not gonna happen. Listic finishes it off with Zergy.
Yep, and here comes the seismic, a slam from up high. What we're gonna find there, Mikhail S is gonna get a little bit of stun damage. Sharik, though, I believe the last stand is doing a lot of damage. Trying to escape. Saf is trying to get out of there. Somehow evading the last stand, staying up, and in fact, Play With Me is gonna get a Walker in the back of all this. And
that's
also
infernal resilience there, Dan. Pure and simple. Also, I feel like with how Abrams over the last few maps has just had a rough run of it. Seeing an Abrams get away for once, love to see it.
True, yeah.
Mid boss now. Tass is down, and Buff Enjoyers, they push the envelope again, saying, I dare you to try and steal it again. Saf is still up. We'll see if history repeats itself. It will be more difficult, though, down 1.
Yeah, and I feel like it'll be more of a problem if they wipe here in the effort, obviously, even if they get it. So got to be really cautious here. And in fact, it's just a bait, it seems like, because in comes Buff Enjoyers to try to catch them moving in. And it looks like a trade here. Saf taking down Listic. Players me already out of the picture here. Trying to find these engagements, dynamic fights on these multiple levels. It's so hard to manage, but so far, Parivision coming out on top here, ZP. And if Sharik's going to go down, Mikael S is critically weak. And it's hard to see that this won't get converted into a mid-boss. This is backfired for Buff Enjoyers.
It is backfired and then some. Obakim waited till the last moment to drop Frozen Shelter. Instead, dies while getting interrupted. And now the mid-boss looking to be free for Parivision. Mikael, though, I mean, we've seen Paradox steals before. This would be the stuff of legends, but also the stuff of feeding in most cases. They don't go for it.
Yeah.
Instead, go for it.
Straight inting.
Yeah, I mean, well, isn't that funny? It's a very post, after the fact view, based on results. If you make the decision and it works, you're a god. If you make the decision and you die, you just look like a fool. And Mikael today, no fool.
Indeed, yeah. It's a problem though, because, well, you know what? I mean, Parivision aren't massively ahead on the souls, but the issue is that now they're kind of like starting ahead. Before, when they stole the mid boss, that situation was they were kind of behind and then evening things up. But now they stand in a much better position to like actually take serious objectives, and that's what they're gearing up right now to do. Positioning around that lane 2 Walker and the lane 1 Walker. They can convert lane 1 into lane 2. There's a great catch there from Play With Me into the tornado, forces the Frozen Shelter, but can Obi-Kim stay up?
I mean, we're going to see also Safka get down and dirty. Just picked up the Colossus, so way tankier than normal if this goes in. I think Buff Enjoyers, or Parivision for the most part, just want the Walker. They still get Obi-Kim as a gimme on top of it. So Walker plus pickoff adds to their lead. And now just almost death bally right now, where you look at how they're rotating around the map. I think they're just going to keep running together and go for the next Walker.
Yeah, I think this is a great plan. Off this Walker, they might have to fall off. We'll see if they can get any kills off of it. So that's going to go down very quickly. And the fight, I don't know if you want to commit fully to this fight. Buff Enjoyers are going to try to see what they can find. And there's a concussive combustion coming in from the back, but the Walker is going to go down. And looking at the kill situation right now, Parivision could absolutely like find a way to go back into the next Walker here on this next lane. But look at the tracking coming in from Litz. And that is a very dead Warden.
Ivy, no fear with the Warden trying to intimidate. Just goes, nope, I will stand in the last stand. I do not care. Also, there's some irony to the idea that Saf picks up Colossus and still immediately dies. Extra survivability or no, but hey, also tanked a lot of damage, I suppose.
And the thing here, ZP, as well, is like, okay, Parivision, they just have to convert the jungle now. Just convert this map control. This is something that we talked about a lot. There was a mistake for them in the map 1, but it doesn't seem like they've made that mistake in the previous map. So you can see them now just farming up.
Yeah, you start wondering about where the farm is going. I think Buff Enjoyers is really feeling the pain from Listic dying early in fights. Like, it's basically been all game long where Listic's been stuck in a hole, hasn't been able to dig back out, so your Infernus is not as farmed as you would like. I mean, even Zergy, though, only 23k, 2k difference between the two. And you look at who has farm on the other team, and it's more well-balanced for Parivision. And also for farm, I mean, forget the carry end. Sharik is a bit behind the game, and when you're behind the game as Warren, you get things like we saw where the Ivy just stands and like counter WM1s you and wins. It's not great as the farm situation for the Buff Enjoyers front line.
Oh, okay. Well, we're looking to see if we can find a fight here, Listic, on this in this mid structure. Very aggressive movement, actually. Obviously, they want to intercept this urn that's being ferried across the map at the moment. And there is the force field, a seismic slam coming on in. All the ults getting pulled out of the back. There's the lasso. Not going anywhere, Mikael. I think
they're stuck. They literally can't move. Which where the Frozen Shelter is. It actually just stuck them in the corner. A little bit forced timeout. We back in grade school. Zergy, though, back to spawn together. Able to find the angle on Mirage on the side. Mikael back into the fight. Drops the wall. Swap back up in 8 seconds. Now, just looking for damage onto the Mirage. Taking to the rooftop. 300 HP. as Together continues laying in damage on the side of the Mirage. It's actually incredible positioning from Together here. Lasso towards the end, Parivision holding Buff Enjoyers off. Getting the better of the trades here, Dan. Only Obakim left remaining.
Yeah, still not a massive soul disparity, so there's nothing to threat too heavily, but it is starting to trend pretty poorly for Buff Enjoyers. As we've talked about, their comp definitely scales quite nicely into the late game, but I think we've also seen a lot of the value that Ivy has brought to a lot of these fights, whether it be sort of the control of space with the kazoo bombs, or that also helps in the mid boss situations. But equally, I think, and maybe more importantly, is these urns. These urns actually have been, I don't know what percentage of urns Parivision have gone, but I think it's like almost all of them. And that does add up.
It adds up, and you're just at the point, too, where the idea of getting stat checked becomes more and more of a thing. And, of course, this is we saw the most being done by Aegis Aurora in the past, just going for quick urn turn-ins on Ivy. This one going to be relatively uncontested. Maybe you get Demov in the area, but... Wait. Mikhail's there. Is the swap going to hit in time? Does not connect. I don't think the swap was tried. It was just a carbine. Instead, Mikhail gets focused down for going for the attempt. Taken on down. Frozen Shelter not in time to save. And Buff Enjoyers are bleeding right now, Dan.
Yeah, they're being chased down after trying to get that forward position to punish the urn. They're getting chased, and oof, very scary presence right now for Parivision. And your most fun player is actually Together on the Mirage at the moment. In fact, like, Saf isn't too far behind on the Abrams, which is not a good sign if you're Buff Enjoyers.
Also, I want to say something about the economy situation. It's good to clarify because people sometimes, will go, it's like, it's this player's fault. Listic getting focused early on was clearly an objective of Parivision. Like, it has little to do with like how Listic is on the Infernus to me, as much as how much Parivision made the game plan here to give Infernus a tough time throughout the early and the mid game. And this has been the reward right now, Dan. As you get later on in the game, you don't have, you have a carry hero that's struggling. But also, you look at items being bought right now. Crippling Headshot in for Together, one of the bigger boosts you can get, just team-wide damage from the Mirage.
Yeah, and it also feels like the Abrams over Mo, like Mo, perhaps they feel like you have to convert with a lot of aggression, whereas with the Abrams, it seems like they didn't necessarily feel that as much, and they're more focused on the economy and the macro, and having the Ivy there instead as well, like, it also allows them to be doing better in those metrics. So better balance, it seems like, at least in both playstyle and how the comp is being played from Parivision. That's allowed them to gain this advantage, 20k soul advantage. Next fight really needs to go here for Buff Enjoyers.
Buff Enjoyers a little bit spread out. Parivision mostly all together. Just Saf out getting farmed. It's so funny because I think Jake mentioned in the intro, was like, yeah, I know in your head, maybe let the Abrams have some farm time in the jungle, and Saf is getting some of that alone time right now, Dan.
Okay, well, I mean, the alone time is about to come to an end, I think. I mean, there's a huge congregation forming in the middle of the map. The Buff Enjoyers is staying tight in a tight formation. And the Parivision is starting to move forward. I mean, you got to respect the mid-boss attempt here and the pickoffs.
This is going to be real up close and personal from the looks of it. The fight taking place multiple levels. Concussive combustion in from Listic early. And they're able to find Tass. Tass immediately picked off Prestus a little bit late to the fight. Dropping the goo ball close quarters, usually where you like to do a goo ball, but you just see Obakim warp stone out of there over the top. Sharik was able to get on the Litz. 2 clean pickoffs right now for Buff Enjoyers. Everyone still relatively good HP. Parivision and hot retreat. Zergy dropping the cards. Forcing out the Veil. Now looking for Prestus. Prestus low, card after card. Goodbye. Buff Enjoyers, a big swing in their favor here, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely what they needed. And the problem is that for Parivision, they've got nothing to do anything about this mid-boss now. It's going to be a free pickup of the Rejuve going in here for Buff Enjoyers. And well, there are currently 2 walkers on the map, one for either team. And I'm going to make a prediction, ZP. I think Parivision's walkers are going to die.
Look at Saf, Dan. Surely the Madman doesn't do it twice in one game. It's coming on down, unstoppable, in, swing, miss. Does not get in or parried, one of the two. It's rather chaotic, but you respect the attempt, and dear God, if Saf somehow gets out alive, that would be a miracle in and of itself, but I'm not sure that miracle is happening. It's more so die around the pillar, Dan.
Yeah, that was asking a lot. I mean, so the interesting thing there is like you always want to calculate like the risk reward, and the risk reward actually wasn't too insane because, okay, you know, obviously the times you're going to actually make that play work is pretty minimal, but you're also not giving up a lot to do so. You know, they're going to lose this Walker like one way or the other. So, and the souls you're losing isn't insane either. So I actually don't hate this one. So, you know, the Zergy one with the Infernus in like a previous match was less favorite for me.
All right, Jake, we're in a pause, which is the ideal time to get a little bit of extra insight. We just saw Saf try and go to the well again. Came closer than you would have expected, but your thoughts real quick as we wait for the unpause.
I think that's a huge fight for Buff Enjoyers. It kind of like mitigates that first mid boss that probably should have been cleaner for them. They should have probably been able to get that rejuve. This time they're getting it. They're getting the team fight wipe, and this is pretty much a dead even game. I think it still shows how you got to be careful on Parivision, right? Like there's huge pick potential from this Buff Enjoyer squad. I mean, the fight that precipitates that mid boss is just a couple pickoffs turning into a huge snowball with Buff Enjoyers having really fantastic chase down potential. This urn could be an opportunity for a little bit of flashpoint confrontation since the lanes aren't very good for Buff Enjoyers. It's a little bit greater to do this urn, but maybe the rejuve is just too much of a threat for Parivision to contest.
Personally, I look at this, Dan. I probably would not go in under these circumstances. I think you maybe let this urn go, and they do just that. But as a result, it's now evened right back up 185k to 184k. Also, importantly on that, helps get Listic back into the game a bit. Still not as high as Zergy, but, you know, as the Infernus gets up in the game, as the game goes longer, you just start feeling better and better. So Buff Enjoyers, you know, they've bought themselves some very crucial time for how they scale.
Speaking of buying time, I wonder if we could look at the items that have been purchased and see kind of where both sides are at the moment in some of those, whether we've hit some new power spikes. Hey, it always works when you request the ZP, but it doesn't seem to work.
You know, you just have to, you know, do the fawns, you know, from Happy Days. You got to like hit your desk in the right way or otherwise, and you know, say A at the very end. But here, production, make me look good here. Can we get a quick item check and see just what the item situation is looking like? Oh, come on, there we go.
Absolute bastards.
Well, you take a look, and clearly Buff Enjoyers right back in it on a spending spree, crippling headshot of their own, and Listic may be getting focused, but won't be going down easy with the addition of Colossus. Although, that's a very late burst fire for Play With Me, itemization-wise. Like, usually Play With Me would get burst fire quite a bit earlier, but slightly different tact in terms of what's been taken first.
Yeah, and this is going to be interesting. How far do you go in here? Because all the Parivision's players are up. They're basically even on itemization, so you're going to be really cautious here. You're going to be going through choke points to do what? You know, you're not going to be taking down the shrines without losing players here. So wisely falling back, and again, as we always say, you fall back onto the jungle. You fall back onto an urn if it's available, but no urn, so just jungle for now. And the respect again for Parivision has to be given slightly because you can always set up. With all of the map control that you have, you can set up ganks. So you don't want to go out too far away from the base at this point. So definitely not a fun position to be in for Parivision. And ZP, you know, we had the Parivision ahead for quite a while in this game after being behind a little bit. So again, a lot of back and forth in these games today.
It's back and forth, but I think it's problematic for Parivision given how this one could end, right? We kind of identified that the Buff Enjoyers have a better scaling late game. I mean, we focus a lot on the Infernus and the Wraith, but as Jake mentions too, heroes like Geist are absolute monsters when you start getting into the 40k, 50k soul range, right? So the window that Parivision has had may be on the verge of closing. Obviously, one good pick here and there can change the tale, but I definitely think right now it is much harder for Parivision to win this one out than Buff Enjoyers. I think Buff Enjoyers has a much clearer road.
Well, I don't know if you saw, but Play With Me just announced the mid-boss timing to the all chat, so that was cool.
Hey, I mean...
8540, he said.
let the other team know that they know that you know. Listic. A little bit of rooftop action here. Both teams trading out a bit of poke. Although somehow that does not end up as a full team fight.
Just a few licks here and there from Listic. And
also, we're being told it might have been team chat. We're just privileged as observers.
Oh, lovely.
But You know, I like the idea of just, you know, telling the other team the time to is like, hey, just so we're clear, you know.
Yeah, see you out in the playground after school.
See you out in the sleep dagger as telekinesis comes out, and Play With Me actually does not want to stick the engage. Full rotations though coming around. That was the opening salvo. See how this one develops. A lasso just stealing Wraith away. Dealt with an immediate teleport. Poke damage on both sides. Saf at half HP. A little bit of extended engage into disengage. Frozen Shelter dropped. Heal and Buff Enjoyers back up. Blitz cannot get away. They get one clean pick. Oh no, Saf under fire too. Saf already down to about 30% HP. So we look at Zergy right now dancing around the outsides, able to hit the right balance between doing damage and not dying with about under a third himself.
And it's kind of interesting to look at the lane control too. Lane 1 and 3 pushed up for Parivision, and 2 and 4 for Buff Enjoyers. So yeah, just generally a lot of parity, but the issue is that Litz is dead, so this is prime territory for this mid boss. And the thing is, DP, is that it's so close right now. I don't know, Parivision, are they going to commit fully into this? It looks like they're looking to do so.
With EU at stake, Parivision looking to contest mid boss here now. The defense of Europe on the line. Play with me. Bullet dance, telekinesis in response. Dashing and diving to the other side. Bullet dance canceled. Hit with the swap by Mikhail. Mikhail looked to Play With Me down. Gets it, but Zergy falls at the same time. 3 down for Parivision, 1 down for Buff Enjoyers. Buff Enjoyers relatively healthy though. Parivision way weaker. Saf about to hit the floor, and Buff Enjoyers might have just done it, Dan. At the very least, enough to get mid boss. I don't think they push to end here, but another Rejuvenator goes a long way to that goal.
Yeah, it's such a hard call there because they were a player down, and Buff Enjoyers are in such a strong spot to like take mid boss or to bait it, which is obviously what they did. And by baiting it, they can get like a really good fight by just like coming out at the right time. And so it's very hard, the math there for Parivision. Do you commit to it, or do you just like let them have the rejuve? Because I don't think they would have gotten a lot of money off of the rejuve. So either way, here comes the push into the base here. This could be the final moments of this game potentially, because Parivision still 4 players down and out.
They want Stagger right now onto Mirage, but the airdrop saves together. Litz, the only other person up here, saves together. They go into the fountain, and no, he can't save himself. Litz dying mid-fountain, so you still get the stagger that Buff Enjoyers was looking for here. They can taste it right now, Dan. Championship of EU on the line once more as Parivision desperately holds on to defend. First stage patron gone. And now for Buff Enjoyers, you know you still got about half a minute with Litz being out of it. Do you stay or do you go? Is the absolute question they have to ask themselves. And Dan right now it's looking for stay. Swap comes on in, answered by Cube. Are they gonna get away? There's another pick here for Buff Enjoyers.
Yeah, this is looking very scary indeed at the moment. We'll have to see if there's any defense to be had. Parivision trying to do everything that they can, but now Zergy's rejoined the fight, and that is going to spell absolute doom, I think. Trying to escape through the door, Saf is going to make his way out of there, but sadly his teammates are going to be fully exposed here, and this patron is about to be fully exposed as well. I don't think there's anything they can do to stop it at this point. Play With Me trying to poke and prod, but actually at the same time, Buff Enjoy is still not in the pit, actually deciding to disengage despite still having a man advantage due to the fact that they've been effectively staggering Parivision.
They want to swap. They're being opportunistic right now. They're giving Mikhail a chance to find a swap. They're setting up for a patron push. Here we go. They'll Play With Me. Dropping the bullet dance. Patron now under assault. Buff Enjoyers trying to grab the championship once more, but it's Play With Me. Burns down Zergy. Saf with the charge on the Obakim, and Buff Enjoyers getting rejected out of the pit.
Yeah, and there might be more kills to follow here. The chase is on at the moment. How many players can make it out of live? That's really the question. However, obviously, they've got the rejuve buff still up, so the respawn is going to be fast. So Parivision can't convert too much off of it, but they'll definitely take the souls as a bounty for those kills, and everything will be cleaned up. But, I mean, Parivision well and truly on the defense here. And if we look at the situation right before the mid-boss fight, ZP, I think it was roughly like a 5k soul advantage. It wasn't very much for Buff Enjoyers, and it's now extended to about just less than 20.
You look at the end game buying here. You see this in any game, whether it be pub or pro, where you get to the late game and people stop focusing on offense. They focus on getting better bullet armor, getting better spirit armor, because the offensive power is off the charts. It's just about living a little bit longer so you can keep contributing to the fight. That's why you look at the the side here. It's just like, well, there's a lot of armor being bought, but especially by Buff Enjoyers with the lead they've put up.
Well, with how games have gone so far today, ZP, I feel like we can't count Parivision out just yet. I do think that what you were talking about with regards to the scaling, and in particular, Zergy on the Wraith. The fact that they have Zergy on the Wraith is very, very scary. And that feels like it could really make the difference, because you need those key ultimates from Play With Me. I feel like to maybe mitigate or at least equalize that in these big team fights, at least create a situation where there can be an advantage at some point for Parivision.
Also, Jason alerted us here as we were talking about items too. Play With Me in the midst of that, getting a late game Ricochet, so even more late game haze coming online. Earn not going to be contested, so Buff and Joy is still working with a reasonable edge, but now we kind of test some of the late game wisdom here, where on paper, if you look at the teams, and in fact, I don't know if a fight is going to happen right just yet, so I think we have time to pull in Jake. Jake, on paper between these two teams, who do you want at 50k souls between Buff and Joyers and Parivision?
I feel like a couple heroes are going to fall off pretty notably for Parivision, especially Abrams, I think. And this is like the late game full 6-stack team fight. It's just so hard to get like an isolated pin target down. And I think Hayes, I'm also a little bit worried for Hayes at just the ability to kite, right? With all the warp stones are going to be online, the ability to get out of the ultimate. It feels like if you aren't getting like that big ultimate setup with something like Abrams and Hayes, I think the fight's going to go against you. And honestly, I think for someone like Infernus, I'd love to see potentially even like a leech or inhibitor, just more of these like long team fight spells, because D-Mob is doing a great job holding on the front line. He's so difficult to kill. He's not dying in almost any of these team fights. Even once his team loses, he's getting out and being a menace. So just the challenge is going to be for Parivision to actually kill and punish these frontliners without getting caught and overextended into a fight that you can't win.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think
huge pickup for D-Mov.
Yeah, the late game inhibitor, where especially if you already have things like Ricochet and otherwise, these are things where it's not flashy, but they really impact the flow of fights. But Dan, as I say that, oh my goodness, Michaela's going for the swap, instead gets lassoed, but Frozen Shelter down in turn. It's gonna be enough to take down Taz. Taz now under fire. The team fight that could decide it all just taking place out of nowhere. Seismic Slam done. Saf going for the charge, gets double jumped over. The quick little leap over the top. Now causing the shift from Abrams. The old 2-on-1. Saf in danger, getting drained right away, but is able perhaps to get out on a knife's edge. Saf somehow still alive. What a ridiculous turn that no one died yet, Dan.
I can't believe Saf survived that. That's ridiculous. That's actually so ridiculous. And to think as well, like, if Saf dies, do they try to like just snowball off of that? But I mean, I guess this would have been the result regardless. Going back for the mid boss, and again, Parivision are in a difficult spot here. They're going to engage, and everyone's leaving the mid boss area as the Rejuve comes out. Someone's going to obviously punch that one on, and it's going to be Buff and Joy's player. Oh, it's so close.
It's
yeah, that's
Mikhail.
good though.
Yeah, Mikhail's able to grab it. Frozen Shelter down right after. Parivision down Blitz. Buff and Joyers down Sharik. The front line arguably maybe better for Parivision, but Tass focused down on the back. Saf and Prestis both low. Buff and Joyers trying to put this one away. Still though, fight in progress. Play With Me, a threat, an absolute menace on the back line. Regenning HP as just pummels into Mikhail at the same time. Still though, Buff and Joyers up one right now with Rejuvenator. Respawn's gonna be coming in sooner rather than later. Mikhail diving in, finds the Mirage. Sharik about to be back into play. Play With Me under the gun. Not able to do enough damage to deal with this paradox. Gets shot by the carbine, and Dan, we might be on the verge of a new champion here in Europe.
Yeah, and it really does seem to play out just as Jake said that it would in terms of these team fights, whether Hayes is falling off, whether Abrams is falling off. You just can't quite get the damage. You can't get. Everyone's so tanky at this point. And here it is. The weakened patron is going to be taken out, and Buff Enjoyers, after a very difficult first map, and honestly, I don't think any map that wasn't difficult today, they are going to claim the title. Congratulations to Buff Enjoyers.
Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Buff Enjoyers, they had a rough few weeks. In fact, a full week of being absent from DFN after a good December. They retool, they kick Seven out of the group. That's right, Seven just was exiled. Who knows when he'll be back, but he wasn't here today. And Buff Enjoyers reaping the rewards. I bring that up here, Jake, because of course we talked a lot about what things Buff Enjoyers could do better, what we could expect from them in the future. And the last time we saw them play, you were adamant of get rid of the Seven, like drop Seven. Well, 7
Yeah.
was dropped, and now they are the champions once more.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. Honestly, I mean, maybe it's just a case of like winning too many scrims. Honestly, for Buff and Joyers, maybe they're just too dominant in scrims. They're winning with 7. They feel like, hey, this hero's great. It's a tournament. But then teams that have prepped for them, teams that see it coming, are punishing them. But I think Zergy today showed that he's way beyond just a one trick playing 7. Like, he looked great on the Infernus, on the Wraith today. Had a much stronger performance on heroes that are honestly, I think, just will let him get into the game a little bit faster, while still being that kind of reliable late game presence. I feel like for me though today, I want to highlight D-Mob. I feel D-Mob really impressed me on the Geist. I feel like he's historically has played a lot of Abrams, a lot of more of the like stun focused frontliners. But the Geist today was immaculate, being like a little bit more of a heavier carry role, a little bit more responsibility, and yet he handled that super well, being honestly like this tower defense in a lot of these earlier, especially these first 3 games of the day. It was like D-Mob just parked in front of towers, holding them down, denying aggression. Even when the game's against him, he's able to stay alive really well. I gotta compliment Play With Me though, right, for being like basically the only person who's picking Haze and making it look very viable. Like, I don't think you can really blame Play With Me at all. Even the pick is like, honestly, it's kind of making it work on the Haze.
Yeah, very much so. Sorry, go ahead, Dan. But yeah, I mean, I'll just say real quick that Haze, not for most people, still with Play With Me, doesn't really matter what the meta might be.
Yeah, and I think if we can see this map here playing with the highlights, and we see Taz on the Bebop, I think that's like another notable shout out for me. I wonder if we're going to see a lot more Bebop because Bebop had value at every stage of the game. Obviously, Bebop has a higher skill ceiling. You have to have like a very good sense as to like what angles to take the hooks, how to get that value from the Bebop. But we saw how insane it was even in the late game. If not for the Bebop hooks that came through, it would have been this would have been a 2-0 in favor of Buff and Joyers. So that's something that I'm hoping that we get to see more of. And just it's props for Taz for that Bebop performance too.
I think what can't be undersaid, though, is the fact that for Buff and Joyers, they have sort of been the raid boss of Europe, right? Where Europe is competitive, that you don't win everything all the time, as evidenced by Buff and Joyers dropping out of DFN for a time and, having some troubled results. And yet, you look at Maelstrom Masters in the lead up to this, Buff and Joyers ran the table and looked super dominant. Were they as dominant here today versus Parivision, where Parivision was able to take a map? Not quite. Parivision made adjustments from Maelstrom Masters just a day ago, but I think the overall storyline that you get here for Buff and Joyers is that they are a resilient team. They're not a team that gets on top and then suffers a setback and then implodes a little bit after, Jake. As you think back to some of the early days in games like Overwatch, you saw that a lot, where a team would be on top and then suddenly start losing, and then here today, gone tomorrow. But Buff and Joyers, they have a resiliency that usually bodes well as you're trying to make a name for yourself in the early ecosystem of a game.
Yeah, I think the EU region is just super competitive right now. I mean, this is probably the closest Deadlock Fight Night we've had to date. I think it's fair to say, like, every single map of the entire tournament was close. Every single map could have gone either way. There was no like super one-sided stomps. And I think Europe in general has really built a lot of strong competitive teams going up against each other, innovating the meta, pushing each other to continue to improve. I felt the Holiday play in particular today was really impressive. Some like lower farm emphasis role for the Holiday, playing really around the lasso, around the pick-off potential. But I mean, people making that look like it's a targeted spell. It's a skill shot, but they're just landing those lassos time and time again, showing that I think Holiday is going to be a hero we will see a lot more of. Maybe even in NA, really playing to that aggressive fighting playstyle that the NA players seem to really emphasize.
Well, Dan, that's going to bring us to our Intel Player of the Match. It is a tough one. There's a lot of discussion back and forth on who it should be. But in this case, we had to give it to D-Mov, just a rock on the Geist all day long. Dan, what'd we see?
Yeah, I think Jake summed it up nicely earlier too. Just like the stability. I think if I'm thinking of one word, it's just stability. Really good, a solid pick that I was able to deal with so many different situations. We had actually a lot of like I think we might see some of them in these highlights, but just like some really sick like situations where on the in-fight decision making, the juking, like using the new heal to get away and get more value out of these spots when it really looked like people that caught D-Mov dead to rights. And Geist is like so impactful throughout the match, and so to have someone that can reliably pick it, especially because Geist is a hero that it's not necessarily like something that everyone is pining to have, So you're often going to have it available. And I think that's like the key. If you have players that can play those characters to a very high level, you're going to have a more consistent game ultimately. And Geist does fill enough roles as well that it's just very useful and reliable to have a Geist player of this skill.
I felt time and time again D-Mob was able to like turn these fights that just look so bad for him. Like it looks like, you know, he's not really getting like the high resource role. Like that's more going to be Zergy, you know, getting a lot of space to farm, you know, even Sharik when he's on the Warden. In the end, the Geist has to, you know, be the frontliner, has to show presence and pressure waves and, you know, show on the map, which puts you at risk, makes you a big target for ganks, for jumps. And I think the fact that D-Mob was able to have such low deaths throughout the entire best of 3, able to have, for me, a really consistent performance, whether he's behind, you know, he's stable, he's not feeding, he's like protecting objectives. If he's ahead, he's pushing the tempo, he's putting himself out there. And I think that ability to really read the game and to like adapt his playstyle based on what's needed from him in the moment, not to be one-dimensional in any way. I think that's what impressed me about D-Mob today, especially for a player that I've seen, you know, not play so much Geist before, right? Like for me, it's seen more the Abrams. That's what I think about him, you know, like more of these like stun-focused team setup heroes. D-Mob showing that he can be in a little bit more of a high impact role, a little bit more of a carry damage dealing role, and be that impact player that Buff Enjoyers need sometimes in these mid games.
Oh, yours muted, ZP.
I'm muted. What
How
in
does
the
it
world?
feel now?
No, that can't happen to me. That doesn't happen to me. In this case, it did happen to me. But I will say, I think the thing that's really notable about players like D-Mob, and in this case, Sharik, right, is that you sort of see how important it is for your frontliners to set the tempo of a Deadlock game, even with Buff Enjoyers not running their typical 3 frontliners, right? Listic now on DPS duty. D-Mob just not only keeping soul levels at a high level, staying alive in fights where, frankly, an average Geist would have just fallen immediately. It just creates so much space and so much attention that it lets everyone else on the team, players like Zergy, really capitalize and take advantage. And, you know, as Deadlock develops, I think one of the cooler things to see is just how people really slot into specific hero roles, and, you know, seeing how people have really evolved frontlining as a role has been awesome. But gentlemen, we are heading soon to our break between regions. Final thoughts, Dan, you first.
Europe just keeps getting better. It was already awesome, and it's just getting more awesome. So, like Jake said, the most back and forth day. And I mean, hey, I feel like NA is trending that direction. So stay tuned to ensure that you don't miss that, because that's a really important storyline. We've got Llama Laws, we've got the bottom barrels. Like, we're actually getting consistent teams. So NA, the storylines are really developing, and it's also really exciting.
Yeah, I just want to say, how the hell did Obikim have 70,000 healing on Kelvin in the last game? That is one of the craziest stats I've ever seen in Deadlock. So, you know, props to him on the Kelvin. I see why he gets all those respect fans.
All right, well, we're only halfway through our day. EU might be in the back window, but NA, of course, is proven to be entertaining week after week as we pursue the storyline of who possibly can take down Hydra Nation. This is Deadlock Fight Night presented by Intel, and we'll be back in just a few minutes.